whatever that is, that national thing.
Oh, is that today?
No.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Ours.
10 o'clock.
Here, April the 27th. I talked to Dave to see if he wanted to play, and he was gonna check his schedule.
Okay, going to call a meeting to order. Ours is our regular CCWD meeting of Wednesday, March 14th at 1 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mona, can you take roll, please?
Yes, Director Strange.
Here?
President Rademacher.
Here.
Director Thomas.
I'm here.
Director Anderson.
Here.
And Director Davidson is absent.
I did hear from Director Davidson. He will be here in about 10 minutes. Public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Any public comment? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. Consent agenda this week comprised of 3A, approval of minutes for the board meetings of both February 14th and the 28th. 3B is review Board of Directors monthly timesheets for February 2018. Number 3C, to approve, to ratify claim summary number 552, secretarial fund in the amount of $2,558,429.46 for February 2018. And then 3D, cancellation, approval of the cancellation of the regular board meeting of April 11th.
Full C3C?
Pull 3C, please. Looking for an action on 3A.
Move for the balance.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we got a motion and a second on consent agenda 3A, 3B, and 3D. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's 4-0, and we'll move on to discussion of 3C. Bertha.
Okay, I just had a couple of questions for you, Jeff.
Yes, ma'am.
One was the Highmark Capital Post-Employment Health Benefits Funding.
Yes.
And this is the one that you had talked to us about?
This
for
is the-
$694,000?
Yes, this is our annual contribution to pre-fund retiree health for existing employees. There's two components of retiree health. One is to pay for benefits for existing retirees. The other is to pre-fund a portion of the benefits for current employees. This is the pre-funding portion under GASB 45/GASB 75.
Okay, now I remember, but I was, within the last week, I was reading in the newspaper about the fact that, CalPERS, is in trouble a little bit because they don't have enough money being paid in. But that they're not in trouble because of us, because we're doing it.
Right. This is different than CalPERS. This is the medical benefit, whereas CalPERS is a retirement benefit. We are required by GASB to have valuations done every 2 years on our retiree health, and that's being done as we speak by Nicolay, who's done our last 2 valuations. We should have that information before your finance committee and to the board before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. The other question was on fuel. I know that we do, this came up when that fella sitting in the audience with the blonde hair, white hair, came up with the WEX bank.
WEX card, yes.
Yeah, doing that. And I wanted to just confirm that we see fuel decrease. Have we been seeing that as far as, because we get it from Ebbets Pass gas service.
Yes, we do.
And then our WEX bank is the other
Yes.
side of it for the other part of the county.
Most of the purchases are made through using the WEX card. We still do Ebbets for some of the items up in the past. We also use some local for when we refill our generators, for diesel for that. So you'll see that, and that does not come through the WEX card.
So,
And Ebbets does a lot of our diesel.
increase, decrease in gas consumption, diesel?
Consumption hasn't gone, I mean, prices have been fairly stable. They've gone up a little bit over the last, I want to say, couple months. The biggest jump was in November when the new taxes came in, because diesel gas went up 19 cents a gallon, the tax went up. So we did see some bump up in there. We are looking at the fuel usage now, actually, because we're starting to prepare our budget for next year.
Right.
So I'm going to be having the latest numbers on that. But I haven't seen any additional trips made. They've been fairly consistent. Price per gallon has just gone up a little bit.
Okay, fine. That's it.
As long as we're discussing this, Jeff, on the bottom of page 1, there's an item that says rent $1,500 for 780B Industrial Way. This may have been on previous reports, but it hasn't caught my eye. What is that for?
That's actually the first time you've seen it.
Okay.
Good eye.
Uh-oh, yeah.
The Jenny Lynn water pretreatment plant project is going to start in April, and part of their task is to tear down some existing buildings to put up the pretreatment plant. One of those buildings houses Mike Samorano, the mechanic in that area, so we have to relocate him. And so what we've done, and we looked at some of our existing facilities to see what we could do, and there are limitations. So what we have done temporarily is to rent a part of a building down at the end of Pool Station. Right as you turn in from 49 and you turn on the Pool Station, you look on the right-hand side, there's two big buildings identical. It says for lease across the top. One we've rented and the other one Habitat for Humanity has just rented. And so we're there for a year to be able to move Mike and all his equipment, his mechanics equipment, and a couple of the other mechanics, and kind of centralize our vehicle repair work at that location.
And then the following check for the $2,250 for the deposit, I'm assuming we'll get that back after the year?
Yes.
Okay,
Either that or it'll be applied to the last month's rent.
I see. Okay, on the next page, the sewer for 6 Mile Village, it's listed at $4,695. I think that I'm right about this, that at previous months, I've seen it at about $6,000. Is there, do you happen to know a reason why it's gone down?
I'd have to look into that, and I will get back to you.
All right. And then the last question I have is on the last page on the DeLee Cassidy interest, semi-annual interest. My recollection about when that project was done, and maybe Jeff can kind of reaffirm my memory, but that project, I think, was funded by an assessment on the property owners. I'm curious about why the district is paying $22,000 worth of interest.
The district is being reimbursed by the assessment district for that.
Okay.
This is part of the bonds, the debt service on the bonds. There's two payments during the year. September is principal and interest, and March is interest only. So the assessments come in via property tax, and we go through U.S. Bank and make the payments to the bondholders.
Okay, so the note C where it says fiduciary payments, in parentheses, funds collected prior to expenditure, that then we have already collected that?
Yes.
All right.
They
Okay.
come in on your property tax installments, the two installments,
Okay,
for those property owners.
very fine.
I have a few questions as well.
Okay.
Just for public clarity, when you say move Mike, you're talking about his equipment now. He doesn't live out on that facility in,
Correct.
okay,
For clarification, we were moving his equipment and his shop. Exactly.
thank you. Now, a couple other questions. The Cataract Mine slurry easement, I see that that's been paid for now. We own that?
The money has been put into escrow. Is that
Okay.
correct, Dave?
Yes, have we finished escrow? Is it closed yet, or is it still in escrow?
So
Okay.
it's still in the process. And what kind of predicted maintenance costs might we have with that over time? Any at all?
None that I'm aware of right now. I mean, it certainly is, once we improve it, then we're going to have some costs associated with it. But as of right now, it's pretty much just in a pretty natural state. But yeah, we'll have to, look at the right-of-way occasionally and assess the asset, but I don't expect any real hard cost right now.
Okay, good. And then the cost to the telephone system upgrade, how long ago was that done? I thought we did some of that work when we had a new billing system come online and all. So that's 20,500. Is this a permanent fix now, or?
It's an upgrade to our system. The last time we upgraded our phone, the backbone to the phone system was in 2008,
Okay.
in that time frame. So this is an iterative process. There was some ongoing work, and so that's why you see the payment. They had completed some of the work. We're still doing some minor work along the side, trying to get some individual tasks done, but the bulk of the system is already in place and has been since November.
Okay, but there's still some more work to go, so,
Yes, we're trying to implement a few extra add-ons, but there's some system issues that we're dealing with that is prolonging that process. One of the things we've been looking for is voicemail to email, but it doesn't seem to be working with our current email system. So there's had to be some work, they're working through that process.
okay, thanks. And then the last question is the U.S. Geological Survey Stream Gauge Program, the $35,000 for that. What does that entail? Is that kind of a reporting? Is that a permit fees that we pay them? 35,000 is quite a chunk.
And what page is that on?
That's the last page, U.S., and then the Geological Survey, it says Stream Gauging Program.
I'm going to
Peter?
defer to the
Yeah.
expert here.
Okay,
That's a contract we have with the USGS for the gauging on the North Fork project. The cost of that is actually fully reimbursed by NCPA. It's just that we hold the contract under the license.
okay, so NCPA reimburses that, cool, okay. That was all I had, thank you.
Okay.
If I'm through, I move for acceptance of, or approval of 3C.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on consent agenda item 3C. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carries 5-0. Move on to new business. 4A, discussion direction regarding cost of service and rate design analysis. Jeff Meyer.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. We are back today to provide you an update to the cost of service study, more specifically the rates, in this case the drought rates, which we discussed the last time. Sean Korn of HDR is here to go over that you provided him direction on how you wanted to see the drought rates, how they were applied. He has updated that, and we're getting close to the end. It is our goal to come back at the next board meeting, March 28th, to have you recommend the proposed rates and set the Prop 218 process in motion and set the rate hearing date, and we're looking at May 23rd.
Okay. Excuse me, we didn't do 3D?
We approved
We
that.
accepted that
Oh, we accepted-
initially.
Oh.
A, B, and D. Remember?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
So at this
Sorry, Jeff.
point, that's okay. At this point, allow me to get the PowerPoint up and bring Sean Korn up.
Thank you, Jeff.
Welcome Supervisor Davidson.
What?
You arrived a little late.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Well, thank you. I have this very similar presentation that we've been working through. I'm going to walk through it. I'm shooting for a silver, maybe a gold star today.
Gold today.
Gold today, okay.
Always, yeah, always go for the gold. Don't be looking for second best.
Sorry, did I call you supervisor?
Hell no.
So as we go through this, the main thing is just to receive any final input from you all to make sure that we have the direction that you would like to see as we go through this process. As Jeff mentioned, he'll be in front of you in a couple of weeks to kick off that process. So I'll start off by just talking about the rate study process and going through, I'm not clicking, Jeff, sorry. I'll just walk through it as we go. As Jeff plays, we'll talk about the process, the summary of the water and sewer. We'll look at the rates, and again, the main change in this is the actual drought rates that we've calculated now, given the direction from the prior meeting as part of this. If you remember, there we go, thank you. So if you remember, we go through that three-step process. This is so that we establish cost base and equitable rates. Our revenue requirement, cost of service rate design. Revenue requirement is our overall costs, what our rate revenues need to be adjusted to meet those costs, both operating and capital. And then the key part is our cost of service. That's where we're allocating those costs between the various customer classes of service so that we meet the intent of Proposition 218. And we have cost-based and equitable rates. And those fold right into our rate design for our year one, which is our transition year, and then the out years are the adjustments based on the overall revenue needs. So again, cost of service is our important component of this to make sure that we meet the intent of Prop 218. And again, remember, we don't track costs by individual customer type, residential versus non-residential. So the cost of service is a method to allow us to allocate those costs back based on how each customer class uses the system, so their proportional allocation of those costs. That allows us to make sure that there are no subsidies in the rates, and it provides that accurate price signal to reflect the cost that they place on the system. That all encapsulates what we need to achieve as part of Prop 218, and as part of that, we need to make sure that we hit the current customer characteristics of your customers for each class of service. So that's why we've gone through that process and looked at each of the different customer classes as part of that. And so as we looked at this, we're talking on the water side, we've gone back and reviewed the consumption characteristics of residential, non-residential, and irrigation. And so again, this is key to that cost of service analysis, to look at how they utilize the system and what facilities are in place to meet those needs. So as we did that, we looked at their consumption patterns as an example. So for the residential customers, to maintain that tiered rate structure, we look at how they use water over the course of the year, and we allocate costs based on how they use that water. Based on that cost of service, we've discussed the rate structure. Some of the recommended changes at this point are to eliminate the allowance, or that included water within the base charge, eliminate the variable tiers by meter size, and to maintain those current tiers for the residential customers. For non-residential, which would be all your non-residential and irrigation, again, the same, no allowance, but then a uniform rate. So that means that the first unit of water is the same as the price as the last unit of water. And one of the reasons for this is because of the characteristics of these customers. When you think of a residential customer, we get that peak in the summer, outdoor irrigation. When we look at our non-residential, they're flat for the most part. They've got a little hump in there because there is some outdoor irrigation, but their peak factor is very low. So the difference between their average day and peak day, that's what drives the cost of service component for that. And that's why we have to develop those different rate structures. For sewer, similar discussion. We focused on residential and non-residential. We're maintaining those current rate structures by class of service and using those multipliers for the non-residential account. So we're good with that component. On the water revenue transition, if you remember this, oh yes, sir.
Sean, back to the multiplier. We've been talking about that for two or three weeks. How has that been done yet?
We're reviewing them at this point. We've gone through and identified all the individual customers who are looking at the usage over the year and comparing that to the multipliers. And then we also have to go out and take a look at their type of business to see if that's changed.
Okay. All right, thanks.
And I think that's a very good question, because the key is the rate that we come back and calculate. That multiplier is customer specific, and so
Right.
that can be adjusted as you go forward throughout the process.
And usually they're established when they first come on,
Yep.
as a customer and then never looked at again
Correct.
until now. Okay, good.
Correct.
All right,
Yep.
thanks.
And that's a key issue on the sewer side. A lot of utilities are starting to go back and review those when they use this approach. I worked with a utility recently where, it was a bookstore and now it's a coffee shop, but they were still one multiplier. Well, a bookstore and a coffee shop have pretty significant differences in sewer flow. So those are the kind of situations that you try and look at as you go through this process.
Perfect.
On the water side, starting with that, and then we'll go into the sewer side, we put together our revenue requirements. So we take the total revenues at current rate levels, so the rates that you have in place today. We project those out based on assumed growth, which is fairly minimal for you all. And then we start backing out our expenses. So we have our O&M expenses, we have our annual debt service payments, we have some transfers, which are moving funds between the renewal and replacement and the operating, to come up with our overall revenue requirement. And overall, the revenue adjustment for the water utility is right below 2% a year over the next 5-year period annually. So that's the overall revenue need adjustment that we have. So now that we know that first box, our revenue requirement, then we can step into our second box and look at our cost of service and rate design. And so as we looked, if you remember, as we looked at your current rate structure, we have a variable meter charge based on meter size, very common, typical in the water utility industry. And we have a tiered rate structure where it includes tier 1 in the base rates, which is your allowance. And then tier 2, 3, and 4 have progressively higher rates to reflect those higher consumption. But we also change tiers by meter size. So that's something that when we looked at the information and data of your customers, we had a lot of consumption in that first component, that first tier, that was not being included outside of that base rate. And so as we went through the cost of service analysis, what we did is we maintained that variable meter charge. So the larger meters still pay a higher base rate as component. But on the consumption side, then we charge for all units of water under that tiered rate structure. So the first tier would now be $1.09 per 100 cubic feet. Tier 2 would be $1.14, $1.56 tier 3, $1.77 for tier 4. For non-residential, it would be $1.47 for all consumption. And so you see that falls about right in the middle of tier 2 and 3, kind of in the middle of the residential customers. That's an important component because in the cost of service, when we looked at their usage patterns, what that peaking is on the system, it was right about in the middle of the residential class. So they are paying a little bit of a higher rate up front compared to residential in tier 1 or tier 2, but a little lower at those higher levels. And that's very common on the non-residential side. Irrigation, we're at the upper end, and that reflects that high peaking. And if you think about the irrigation, the potable irrigation for lawns and parks and all the different things that use it, they're off and then bam, they're on. And they run pretty hard and then they come off again. And so you've had to build that capacity, and that's what we're trying to capture through the cost of service. For the residential customers, we maintain those tier sizes that you have in place today, 4 or 5/8 inch meter. So the first 1,000 cubic feet, for next 5,000, next 6,000, and over 12,000 total. And that reflects how your typical customers use water over the course of the year. So based on that cost of service, then we're able to establish our first year rates, which is the second column of numbers in 18, 19. And then the out years are projected based on the overall revenue needs. So back to our just slightly less than 2% a year, those are adjusted based on that. Same with the non-residential. You can see the base monthly meter charges by meter size. What this means to your customers is anywhere between 90-cent and $9 a month, I believe this is bi-monthly bill impact, depending on how much water they use. And so one of the trade-offs as we went through this process, you see the numbers on the bottom right are a little less for the higher users. A big component of that is because we're now charging for each unit of water, starting with the first unit of water through that meter. And so that adjusts that. But you still have that conservation-based rate as part of this. So that's the water rates. One of the items we talked about in addition to water rates is a drought rate. And so what we do, as we talked about last time, is we go back and look at your urban water management plan, and we take a look at what those stages are and what those target conservation levels are. And so this has a summary of the various stages, stage 1 through 5, and it includes up to a 10% for stage 1, 11 to 15% for stage 2, and so on for each of those stages up to greater than or equal to 50% in that highest stage. So what we do to establish a drought rate is we take those proposed rates that we had for year 1, so next year's rates, and just the consumption component to see if we reduce consumption by 10%, what is that change in revenue? And what is that additional rate that needs to be charged to maintain your current level of revenue? So we've gone through that process for each of these different stages, and we chose the midpoint of each of these, and you can see here on this slide, at stage 1, if it was a 10% reduction, there's $180,000 that needs to be collected in addition due to the reduction in consumption. All the way to if we reduce consumption by 50%, we would need to collect $883,000 to keep our revenues at the same point. And that's the purpose of our drought rates, is that even during times of drought, your costs don't change. So you may save a little on maybe a little electricity on pumping, but you may also spend a little more on the public outreach, getting information out to customers to say, you know, we're in this situation, the state has mandated it like they did a couple of years ago, we need to cut back. And so this allows you to maintain that same revenue stream over that time period. So based on those stages, then if you are in a stage 1, we would add 15 cents to each 100 cubic foot or unit of water that the customers use on top of those current rates. Same for each of those stages, that would be in addition to the proposed rates in each of these years. Now, these also will adjust out over the 5-year period, so they will go up by that overall revenue adjustment need as well, because our revenues also go up over that time period, so we need to target that same level of revenue over the 5-year period.
Sean, if I just note, and I know you had discussion about this at the last meeting, but one of the things that we're trying to make sure that we preserve is as much flexibility for the board as possible in this. And the idea being that, you know, first of all, we know that the triggers on this most likely would be the state forcing mandatory conservation with a declared drought emergency across the state, or it could be an extended drought that affects our local supplies, although that's probably less likely than the state scenario. But basically, we want to give the board the most flexibility so that even if we were, say, at a stage 3, and we were compelled to do that by the state, that doesn't necessarily mean that you would automatically, if you did decide, and that of course would require further action of the board, future action to invoke these charges, even though we've got a 218 process that we'd go through to authorize it, it wouldn't be enacted, it wouldn't be in effect until the board takes future action. But even if you decided to take the action, it doesn't mean you'd necessarily, because we're in stage 3, have to impose the stage 3 35-cent additional surcharge. You could provide direction to staff that, you know, we're going to, we may have already gone through stages 1 and 2 without triggering the drought surcharge, and it may be the direction of the board that you want to see us to continue to make up that 20% with additional savings or other revenues or whatever. And instead of the 0.35, it could be the difference between stage 2 and 3. It could be the 15. We could always go less than that amount. So in any event, I just want to make that clear. I know we have to, you know, describe it in this way and be transparent about it. But we also want to be transparent about the fact that we want to preserve the option for the board to do something a little less in this if it's possible for us.
So if the state did mandate conservation at 20%, which would be stage 3, we could if we decided to as a board agree to a 18%, 12%, 10%, or would it have to be one of these percentages?
You would pick your category
Okay.
because we have to notice these maximum rates.
Okay,
So it would have to be the category. So as Dave said, you know, if you didn't want to go up to the 35 cents, you could go to the 20 cents.
so I noticed he did say .15, is why I asked the question. It has to be one of .15, .20, or .35 if we're at stage 3.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's because of the 218 and what we're sending out to the public at this point?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep. Yep.
thank you.
And that's how it's worked over the last several years, and I told you my horror story last time about having to implement these in the middle of the drought. And so this is a great tool to have in your toolbox if you need to use it. And
Oh, sending out the 218 in the middle of the drought.
that's
okay,
even
right.
worse, yes.
Right,
yes.
okay.
So that makes it challenging as part of this. So that's your ability to turn, staff would say, here's the situation. You all have the authority to turn it on and turn it off when that situation changes.
Yeah, I need,
So-
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so we are going, say we're going through a drought, you know, and so we will certainly
Well, let's
identify.
pretend.
Huh?
Let's pretend.
Oh, pretend? Pretend we're going through a drought. We will have our financials completely analyzed so that we'll know, because conditions are gonna change, the number of customers are gonna change, you know, I'm thinking of the expenses that we're going to have to pay still, because those, you know, not necessarily, but, you know, they can. So I would expect Jeff and his, and Patty to look at every penny.
Sure.
That's
As we did in our experience with the last 5 years, and we were able somehow, some way to make things work by reducing expenses and trying to, and we relied probably too much on reserves. But the reality is, we all recognize that, particularly with where where things are probably going in the future with a hydrology that's more extreme on drought, and we get really wet years and we probably get more extended drought, we could be in a situation where the gap from consumption revenue is so substantial that we simply cannot cover it. We still have the system we have to maintain and meet our legal obligations. And we need to have the ability to recapture some of that. It may not be all of it. Again, the state may mandate a 25% reduction, and we triggers a stage 3, but the board may say, we're only going to go to stage 2 as far as this increment, and we're going to make up the additional lost revenue, that 15, well, the additional lost revenue between stage 2 and 3 will have to be made up in some other way. That's totally within the discretion of the board, and we would work to come up with options for the board again. We just want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a position of not being able to cover the basic expenses necessary to deliver safe, reliable service.
So we're going through our 218 process. This is going to be a big part of it. And just so that it's approved, we can do whatever the board decides.
Yeah, within the framework of what's adopted here, yes.
Yep.
And again, we need to be, again, I will say it at every time we get out and do public outreach, and we've got a lot planned in the next month, is to make sure that the public understands that just because this is approved, if it is through the 218 process, does not mean that any of these will ever go into effect. That would require an action of the board that would be at a meeting, and it'd be publicly noticed, and if the public had concerns about it, that would all be discussed, and the board would make an informed decision at that point.
So I have a question just for clarification. We are also talking not only drought, but also if we had an emergency in-house. And I think that's important to include that in the title of our discussions here. That way, if we end up with having, and hopefully not, any sort of emergency in-house that requires that we consider this, that we don't have a very angry customer base saying, oh, you never talked about the emergency, it was just drought. So I want to avoid that if you can.
Yeah, and I'll sometimes use the term water shortage event. You know,
Yeah.
That's something I've used in the past because that tries to encapsulate a little bit more of the situations that you could experience.
Yeah, good.
And so, and that would be the verbiage that we're talking about, Terry. You want that to go out in the 218 process as far as
Yeah.
in the correspondence to potential, or to all of our customers?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that would encompass it.
yeah.
The last piece of the water side is ag rates. I'll let, you want to just comment, Jeff?
Certainly. Before I get to this particular point, are there any other questions on the residential, the regular water rates that we have, and the water shortage rates that we're looking at?
Nope.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the fallout from this, or the impact. That if we're in the worst-case scenario at a 50% mandated reduction, and we're talking about a customer that's not going to increase their usage beyond the 12 or 1,000 gallons per cubic feet per billing cycle, that it would result in their bill only going up $20 per billing cycle, so $10 a month under the worst-case scenario.
Approximately 12. It would go in year one, it would be $1.29 per 100 CF. And if they're using 10 units, 10 of those, it would be $12.90.
Correct.
They use
I was multiplying times 16,
Yeah,
okay.
10 times 100.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're right. All right. I was wrong on that. But, so it's not, I don't want to diminish the impact to some people, but if it's $6 a month that we'd have to add to their bill, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's not like doubling their bill.
And that assumes that they don't conserve.
Mhm.
So they stay at that 1,000 units. If they conserve the 10% and come down to 9 units, then that drops that impact even lower. So that's the goal here, is you remember my chart from last time.
Yeah.
If the customer conserves and hits that target to 10%, 15%, whatever it is, their bill should be roughly the same.
Same as it was. Okay.
If they don't conserve, it will be higher as part of that, but that would be the change that they would see.
Okay.
Sean, and maybe if we could just hit one more time, slide 12. We covered that briefly, but I think it's really important to note that if, in the highlighted areas based on the average customer water use, residential customer water use, but the reality is, as we've heard in our outreach, people want to have maximum flexibility to be able, if they determine, for example, if you've got, someone who is, has for whatever reason needs to try to, reduce the amount of their bill, to be able to have that control, somebody in a fixed income or whatever. I mean, you can see that if someone is limiting their water use, say strictly to indoor as they absolutely need it, they can make a pretty, meaningful change in the amount of their bill. And I think that's one of the things, there's a limit to that as far as you can go with it, but, I think that's important for us to be able to communicate that to people who are looking to, again, to have more control over the bill, keep the amount down. And, that kind of syncs up with some of the programs that we have on water efficiencies. So I think that's important to note.
Just a question, how do we educate our customer base? All of these will be up on our website so that they would be able to go in and analyze it, well, provided they have a computer,
Yeah.
and, see what's going to happen to them is what the importance.
Yeah, and we need to have really, really good, very clear, concise information for the public, in the way of written materials that we hand out
Okay,
and
so
on the
they
website.
could conceively get a hard copy of this.
They could, but I'd like to make it even more clear and understandable than some of these type graphs and charts. I want to be able to tell a very clear, explanation of what the implications are and how it affects them and what some of the options are. So if you want to try to, for example, reduce your bill, here's the way that you can do it. If you want to reduce your water use, here's some programs that we have that assist in that. Here's a way that you can have more control over the amount of your bill.
Just a recommendation, I still think the average consumer doesn't recognize the difference between a cubic foot and a gallon. And I don't know if there's anywhere on when we go out to the public that maybe we can put, cubic foot equivalent, 7.49 gallons or something along those lines.
Yes. It is in the draft version of the Prop 218 notice.
Yeah, we have that under each table, kind of the same 100 CF equals 748 gallons, like what we did here, yeah. Absolutely.
To review what we talked about at the last meeting regarding agricultural rates, the current cost for agricultural rate is $9.70 per acre foot. This has been the rate in place since the early 80s, possibly even late 70s. We've had several attempts to try to increase these rates, but they were unsuccessful. In looking at this particular rate, the question is, how do you create a nexus between cost and also the amount that you're charging? Obviously, we don't treat this water. It flows naturally down the Calaveras River, downriver from Hogan. However, we do have costs associated with Hogan, and those costs include our annual payments to the Army Corps of Engineers, which is about $250,000, $260,000 a year, some of our permit costs and so forth. So Peter looked at all these and created a cost per acre foot and looked at how it's been distributed. He did get to meet with the farmers in this area. That was back on February 19th, and informed them of our plans, where the proposed rate in looking at this is going from $9.70 to $12 per acre foot in fiscal year 18-19 to $15 to top out at $18 per acre foot in fiscal year 2021. Just to give a footnote to this, we really don't receive a whole lot of revenue on this. We're looking at I think it was $7,000 a year currently. So at the end of this, we may double that. That's not a significant increase, but it brings the costs in a line, or the charges in a line with our costs and what our water suppliers downriver charge as well. And we did check with council, and I did check with other agencies, and we can include this particular rate process in our overall 218 process.
Really?
So the
Yes.
percentages, okay, so it would require, they're included in the 50% plus one. It would
Of
have
the
to be,
total-
of the total.
Total,
All
yes, they
residential,
are.
all commercial, all non-residential, all
Exactly.
agricultural.
Good.
All in the same bucket.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So my question is that these folks don't have riparian water rights, that they could just say, you know?
Actually, some of them do have riparian, and they get credit for that.
Well, but the whole riparian issue is one of those that always ends up being, we could argue about it all day long. If the dam wasn't there, depending on when they're taking the water, they don't necessarily have a right to water that's released later in the summertime. The riparian rights were back in the day when there was no dam, and the river would go dry, so they only had it during certain periods of time.
Yeah, the storage, I
Right,
mean, the stored
right.
water, that's yeah.
So I think that you could also add, we have management responsibilities of that water to meet in-stream flow requirements and whatnot too, as
Okay.
part of our responsibility that this money will help cover.
Yeah, like the HCP, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
yeah, it's why we have to address it. I mean, it's,
Right.
the affordability of ag water really resonates with me, because I know that the bottom line, that cost factor is a critical factor for the viability of ag. But if it gets to a point where you haven't adjusted it since the 80s, and it really starts to look more like something that is really beyond the basis for any cost, it's not related to any cost, I think you're really at risk of having that called into question by the state. I mean, I don't think that's good for anybody. So I think this is fair, and I think it really does protect all of our interests.
I will say I'm surprised that it gets to be lumped in, because we've had this discussion over the years, every time a rate increase or something has come up, and it's never been, no one's ever brought that forward. So, I mean, that's great news that, again, it's not a great deal of money, but it's just for the realistic value. I mean, we shouldn't be subsidizing these people. I don't want to charge them too much, but we certainly shouldn't be subsidizing them. So
Yes.
that's good.
I did a little surfing on the web and came up with a figure of the average cost for ag water per acre foot is $700. So,
Well, it's highly variable depending upon whether you have a contract with the Bureau.
well, I'm not suggesting that we're going to that, but if this is the only opportunity that we're gonna have for the next 10 years, we're gonna put this in effect for 5 years, and we have to wait again for 5 years to adjust it again. $18, it seems unbelievably low. I mean, that's.
Director Thomas, I think you're probably talking about the spot market for water transfers, and that's more of a, year-to-year type transaction. I mean, this is, and particularly that's, if you're talking about water you're serving to your customer base within your own jurisdiction, this is, I think this is in the ballpark of what's reasonable. I know there are other agencies that are far less than this, and I think that they all recognize that that's going to have to change.
Excuse me. Part of what Peter has researched through this is we do have contracts with these users, correct?
Right.
And some of the language within the contracts does limit what we can charge. Is that correct?
Yeah, some of those were set so that they were not supposed to be more than what other users were charging. So that would mean Stockton East, and I guess to some extent, I guess it's Central San Joaquin agency as well. And so they're kind of tied to that, but right now I think Stockton East is charging about 20 to 23 per acre foot right now. So, but they do a little bit more work. They put in physical dam structures, and there's more management associated with that. And then we did look at there was a sort of a survey of agricultural users when we were starting to look at the rates. And it's done by, I guess, it's a nationwide survey, but they focused on California. It's kind of similar to what you would do with looking at population numbers, but this would still fall into like the lower 20% of agricultural rates across the state, even at this rate. But I mean, what's involved in some of the landowner side of things associated with that is those rates, they do vary quite a bit throughout California. So
I want to remind everyone also that, we use about 4,000 acre feet of water out of Hogan a year. We have 30,000 acre foot reservation. I would love for the general public to know that we're 20% cheaper than if you're in San Joaquin County. I'd love to see that water go to a beneficial use within our own county, as opposed to let it roll down the road. I mean, it's in the county's best interest to try to use more ag water down in that area, just for the economic purposes. Not so much what the value is to the district, but what the value is economically to the whole county. So, I mean, I think even at this $18 rate, the more people that know that it's cheaper than the $22, the better off they are. I mean,
And I believe Peter was mentioning recently that he has one more user, a grower who's interested in connecting through our services. And so that goes along the same line as what you were saying, Director Davidson. We want to encourage use in that area. And as Peter mentioned, our rates are not totally comparable to Stockton East because they provide different services than we do. So it's a matter of apples to apples. If we provided the same service, yes, we could probably charge as much as they do, but we don't. And I think this is a fair rate at this particular point in time. And I also think that it helps promote agriculture on our side of the county line.
And we're kind of tied into the cost of what it cost us to serve them. That's what the whole purpose of this study is about, is
Right.
to limit what we are able to charge, as opposed to just picking a number that another district is charging. We can compare it, but what you just said is our costs are different than theirs to maintain it and to duplicate what they're doing.
Exactly. And then we also have to go back to the contracts too, the existing contracts we have with these growers.
Okay, and that's my question. So how old is this contract? Is this one of them friggin' in perpetuity contracts that some brainiac in this district 30 years ago signed is this a contract? Okay.
I will put that down as
When it-
research.
Well, let me answer.
When is this contract expire? Peter, do you know? When these contracts expire?
We don't have to identify the brainiac.
No, we don't need to know what college
contracts
professor
were-
figured this one out.
Right. So the contracts actually, many of them are, I don't want to get to too much detail on this, I'm sorry. Are interim contracts actually, because at the time the district was contemplating developing basically an ag district. And so those people are still working off of those interim contracts that are basically in perpetuity. It doesn't really have. It doesn't
I
really have-
would caution that the use of that, I think, we may, as a legal matter, we might have a different opinion from council. So
Yeah.
I don't, if you want that level of detail of what the contracts obligate us to and everything, we can certainly provide that, but I think it's probably a question for council.
They're mostly associated with the settlement of the riparian rights that we discussed earlier. There's many landowners that were there that predated the dam
Right.
being built.
Right.
And then they're associated with how the water is sort of conveyed through CCWD's contract and maintenance of that portion of the storage pool and the dam.
Right.
There's not a lot of detail when it comes to rates and things like that. It's mostly just a transactional type contract. And I have examples if that's something the board's interested in.
I'm sure it reads very similar to the 71 agreement that we have with Stockton East. And if you look, Terry, I'm sure this will really make you comfortable. But if you look at the names on most of those contracts, they were most likely former board members of Stockton East Water District at one time or another.
Yeah.
Or probably current.
Excuse me, this doesn't really relate to rates, but I'm listening to Jeff, and Jeff talks about, he wishes that someone was using this water instead of letting it go down. And at one time, a couple of terms ago, we had a director who was looking and trying to, develop the ag part or the ranching part, the use of water, and we just, that was done, and then it's not being looked at anymore. I don't know where the ag community is on use of
It's
the water.
market driven. Right now, that, there's industries that are encroaching in the area, and I think there's probably the best opportunity we've had in a long time with the nut industry. Like it or
Right,
not,
right.
they're a high water user. We've got water, hopefully the two will one day meet. Currently, most of them are, sucking it out of the ground. We know that that's not a long-term plan, and when these people invest, millions and millions of dollars in an orchard, they're not gonna want it to go, go dry, so hopefully they'll come up with some sort of infrastructure program that will, the bottom line is, we need the infrastructure. We have the water, the infrastructure is the costly part. At $18 an acre foot, you can't build anything with that, They've all pretty much gotta be adjacent,
Yes. We have not forgotten that process, and there,
Okay. Thank you.
when we do have people who come and talk, and we do engage them.
You mentioned the 30,000 acre feet of reservations on going down through Jenny Lynn. We'd have to charge the same amount if we somehow had an ag producer that came over to Copperopolis area and wanted to pull some water out of the Stanislaus. We'd have to charge them the same rate, cross county, right?
I would imagine there might be different costs for that, but
There's different costs associated with different sources, but we would look into that, yes.
First of all, probably the legal fees to fight the downstream users
Oh, yeah.
over that one particular instance.
Would make it
would make it,
exorbitant, yeah.
not cost effective. Thank you.
What if we did it without anybody knowing?
So that's the
Hey,
one.
that was a joke.
I'm sorry, I was thinking about something else, and I caught the last end of it. I was gonna weigh in on, probably let it go. Yeah.
So that's the water side of things. Moving into the sewer side of things, we did a similar revenue requirement based on your specific costs to operate and maintain the sewer facilities. Again, revenues at current levels projected based on some minimal growth, and start backing out the expenses. Overall, on the sewer side, a little higher revenue adjustments, about 4% a year overall. And remember, as our discussion last time, This is the phased even approach that we're recommending at this point in time. So this means that over the first 3 years, we are still borrowing from the water reserves to smooth this out. And then that's being repaid over the next 10 years back to water, and that's all built into this analysis, that that's coming in for sewer, and then it's going back out for water over that time period.
A very important statement that you just made, to smooth the increases out over time.
And I want to take this opportunity to remind the board that part of the reason why you see, when we was talking about the loan and the cost increases, remember, we are also having to fund a payback over the last 2 years from the sewer fund deficits, and in the amount of about $716,000. And that's also included in that rates, and that's also the 10-year time frame. I just don't want to lose track of that.
So by borrowing that, we're able to smooth that out over that time period, minimize those rate adjustments to the maximum extent possible as part of that over that time period. So given that, we also do a cost of service based on residential, non-residential. Those are our two primary classes. You can see here the bi-monthly bill would go up about $7 a month for the residential and about $4 for the non-residential, based on how they impact the system going forward. And you can see cumulatively overall or annually what that bill adjustment is for those customers. So I'll stop there and see if there's any other questions on the sewer side. I think the big thing for sewer was getting those revenue levels up to support the ongoing operations and capital needs over this 5-year period.
Maybe I misunderstood, but you didn't mean to say that the bi-monthly charge is $759 per month. It would be per bill, every 2 months.
Correct, yes,
Okay.
bi-monthly, yes, thank you if I said that incorrectly.
I just find it interesting that some of the non-residential don't have a higher sewer usage.
They might going forward, right? I mean, with the multipliers being adjusted?
That could be part of it, if those need to be adjusted, that bill would go up higher. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, especially, the commercial restaurant, coffee shop, something like that. I mean, you're gonna see much higher
Yeah,
wastewater use.
Yeah, and one of the things we looked at as part of the cost of service is that strength component, and that's what you're referencing, is how nasty is that wastewater. It costs a little bit more. Majority of your costs are incurred just to get it from point A to point B and get rid of it, essentially. The strength is a piece of that, but it's a fairly minor piece of that as part of this. And so that's why you see some minor differences between the two of these.
You know, not to start down a rabbit hole, but I will anyway. I found it really interesting when in the last week or so they began to talk about utilizing recycled water for water supplies. And to me, what that looks like is we get to release it into the creeks, which would save us millions and millions of dollars. I mean, I don't know how they're considering this, but I mean, the state is actually beginning to talk about that. And it really made the light go off in the back of my head. It's like, if we could release it into the creek, which is all we've ever asked to do in high water flows, let the water that we treat to a drinking water standard run down with the rest of the water, and therefore, theoretically fortifying supplies downstream. How is that a bad thing? Particularly for us up here in the, with nobody above us except San Andreas,
Your thought process. I was just talking to somebody else about this this week. That would be the logical way to interpret what came out about the reuse of recycled water for potable use, indirect potable use, which, by the way, Peter Martin worked on, was one of his primary responsibilities at San Diego, City of San Diego, working on that, because that effort was what drove this change in the regulations, was to try to be able to use for some time, recycled water has been injected into groundwater and then pulled back out for potable water. Orange County's been the leader in that. But this is to be able to augment surface water storage reservoirs with treated wastewater and to be able to then treat it again and use that for drinking water. But really, while in some respects it makes it easier at the end of the process to be able to utilize it for human consumption, it doesn't make it any easier to get it into the stream, because any discharge into the stream is still water of the United States covered by NPDES permitting requirements, and as we know, operating under a permitted copper, that is the most complicated and expensive of all processes under
Right,
the, yeah.
but I mean, to accomplish this goal, that has to change, right? I mean, how else is it gonna get transferred? I mean,
I think it probably becomes one of the additional costs to make it happen, and probably why this doesn't really make sense unless you're in an area where, like Southern California, it's other options for the next increment of water are not reliable or not affordable, and this would be a, yeah.
Well, again, I just, I was just dreaming.
Let's fill that rabbit hole in.
Back to rates.
So at this point, to summarize, we'll take any final comments, direction from the board as part of this on either the revenue adjustments, the rates themselves, the drought rates or the ag rates. And really our next steps are to finalize the study. We're working on a written report, one for water, one for sewer, as part of that, and then initiating the Prop 218 process. As Jeff mentioned at the beginning, he'll be in front of you in 2 weeks to set the public hearing date. Tentatively here, we're looking at May 23rd during that normal board meeting. And then no later than 45 days, send out that Prop 218 notice to all of the customers so that they see what it is, so they understand what time the meeting is, the process to protest, and as well as public outreach with some town hall meetings. And I'll let Jeff talk about that a little bit.
Certainly, thank you. The key, there's a couple key steps that I'd like to complete today. One is for your board to provide us direction that the rates that have been presented to you over the last several meetings, the water, the sewer, the water shortage rates, and the ag rates are the ones that you want to include as the proposed rates that will go forward to the hearing. That's the first step. The second step is to confirm that the Prop 218 hearing will be on Wednesday, May 23rd at 1 p.m. at a regularly scheduled time for your board. May is a little bit of a challenge because the second week of May, which would be normally our meeting, is the week of Aqua. So we've kind of had to shift some things around to for this particular public hearing, and we also have to meet that 45-day minimum noticing period. If your board authorizes this process to initiate the 218 process on the 28th, which is a Wednesday, we'll work with Data Pros, which is our billing company, and they'll be mailed out that week and be delivered to customers at the beginning of April, which will meet our 45-day period plus some. So it's a very tight time frame to get these notices out. But we need to know, A, if there's going to be any changes to what's been proposed, and B, of the May 23rd date.
Excuse me, you made mention of, or commented on the Aqua
Yes, the Aqua
Spring Conference?
Spring Conference is the second week of May.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
So
Yeah,
that
we're
would be,
probably going to cancel our meeting that week. We usually do if it falls in the second week of May. But yeah, that's May 7th through the 10th, and so the May 9th meeting will most likely be canceled, or a regular CCWD meeting. So at the board level here, do we understand what Jeff is talking about? We're given authority to do the 218 process, and start kicking that off on our next meeting, which is March 28th, and then the public hearing on May 23rd. Any objections, any further instructions, any changes to the rates? This is it.
I think that all that Sean and Jeff covered with us was, any questions that we had in our minds were I was completely satisfied, so that as far as I'm concerned, we've covered all the bases.
We're into redundancy at this point.
So I'd suggest that we separate those two in different motions. One is the rate agreement and all as far as the percentages for all three categories, and the second one then is the date for the March. You want to do it all in one?
I don't think we have any action to take, and it's just discussion and direction.
Oh,
I don't think,
We'll be back at the
Oh,
next
okay.
meeting with a request to formally
Sorry.
set the hearing and formalize what will be in the 218 notice.
Right.
so it's just verbalizing any.
You'll get to hear it again, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Not for me this
I have one small concern about just talking about drought rates, and I'm trying to come up with a better description, but, supply restriction or supply interruption. I don't like to always talk about drought, because what drought does is it makes people want to just
Panic.
continue
Yeah.
to conserve, and that's great if that's what they want to do, but it's, we do pay our bills by water usage. And so if there's another term, whether it's supply restriction or supply interruption, which could be caused by drought, could be caused by, failure of some sort, so I just want you to consider a different term besides drought.
Because
So
the
what
public will
happens-
say, oh, you mean drought?
Well, no, what happens in a drought is
Yeah.
mandatory conservation. Is that a better word?
Well, but it doesn't necessarily include if something else occurs.
Well, as far as the drought part, it does, but the other part is supplies, and so it always has been drought and water supply shortages are the two things that we're looking at, and that we might implement those rates for. But how about if we use mandatory, or state mandatory conservation and water supply issues?
Yeah.
It's
Sean
hard 'cause
made,
people think there's a drought every day because they listen to Sacramento. We don't, we don't necessarily have the same circumstances.
Sean made a comment and made a water shortage event, something along those lines, because you're right, Director Davidson, we're in the business of selling water, bottom line. That's what we do. And some of the verbiage that comes out of the Capitol doesn't necessarily apply to us. And if there's a water shortage event, whether it's caused by a failure in the system or some mandated or a climate issue, I think we need to be able to capture all those types of events in one phrase that just doesn't necessarily scream out drought.
Well, right, I'd like to see something besides drought as the headline. If it's supply restriction or something along, then maybe have a couple subcategories so people understand there are several conditions that
Yes.
this could occur. I think that'd be helpful.
This is all tied to the water shortage contingency plan, so
Yeah.
why don't, I'd say water shortage. I mean, it's hydrologic or regulatory or other emergency water shortage. Rate structure, yeah.
But I also don't want to put it in people's head that we are short on water supply.
Yeah, that wouldn't
No.
be
I
a
don't
water
like that one
shortage
either, to be honest
in
with you.
conservation.
So
I mean,
water shortage is out.
would there? Or I guess there would be. There, in some ways.
It's a regulatory action that shorts our ability to utilize the water resource. So it is creating a shortage
But if, I
in
mean,
a sense.
Hogan has, it can get low. I mean, I could see, a period of time where, we could have to do something, self-impose some sort of restriction. But of course, if that were the case, the state would have already done it, I'm sure, but.
And maybe it would look better in these handouts, and this PowerPoint, and the next one that we're gonna get just like it, that it doesn't say drought rates, or the one slide, proposed drought rates.
Yes, it'll change.
That would,
I think water shortage is fine. I mean, if you want to control what people think, good luck. I mean, they're
No,
gonna.
I'm not trying to
but
control what they
it-
think, I'm trying to give them more scenarios than just drought.
Yeah, that was my original comment, I think you were here then, about the idea of self-imposed or in-house water shortage because we had a facility go down or whatever. I mean, they're all different types, well, there are a number of different potential actions that could be taken that are out of our control that would reduce the amount of water that we have on a temporary basis.
I'm sure you guys will come up with something.
Yes, we'll do that. And I just wanted to follow up on a comment President Ratterman made. The PowerPoint that you will see in 2 weeks will not be the same because I'm not Sean. And I won't be able to explain things as well as he does, so I'm going to get down to the nuts and bolts and just show you what the proposed rates are going to be.
Okay, good. Looking forward to it.
And I'm not sure if you want to take public comment on this, but the other question I had is if you're okay with May 23rd at 1 PM.
Yeah, I think we're all okay here at the board level with everything that's been presented here. And we do have one last thing, is public comment before we're done with this item. Any public comment on item 4A? We do have public comment.
Okay. Looking at the bi-monthly bill for sewer. Since a lot of your sewer customers are part of disadvantaged communities, and they're already struggling, some of us are on Social Security, which is not a whole lot. I can see possibly wondering what state I'm going to move to after 2020, because there's no way that much is going to fit in my budget. It's hard enough doing the 172. So, just a thought, people. I know, like I said, a lot of them are disadvantaged in Douglas Flat, Vallecito, in Terry's district. I can't see any of us being able to afford that 200 every 2 months on our income. Okay?
I
Thank
agree,
you.
that's a comment that we're gonna hear over and over again, there's no doubt about it.
No, it's good to get it heard.
Mr. President, if you'd like for me to, do you mind if I weigh in on a couple of ideas related to that subject?
Oh, no, please do.
I just wanted to, this has weighed on us heavily, it really has, and thinking about the perspective of, our the customers that are going to be affected most by it and they're with the least means to pay for the additional increases. And so part of that was why, a huge part of it, why at the beginning we worked through the idea that we had to find the savings as much as we possibly could before we ever reached additional revenue. That was part of it. Then it was also to try to again, based on what we heard, try to make the increases, avoid the high spikes, try to smooth it out, try to make it, because what we heard was people would rather see, again, smaller increases over time than any dramatic increase in one particular year. But lastly, the one thing that we continue to work on, and it probably is known because it's more outside of this setting, is trying to have a pathway forward where districts like us can have the option to do something in the way of a differential rate for our customers of a certain income level, like PG&E does with their customers and other utilities. And the reality, we've spent a lot of time on this as part of this effort as well. The challenge and the obstacle right now under doing it within a rate setting process is that 218 doesn't allow it under the proportionality requirement. So we'd have to use other revenue, and the challenge there is we don't have other revenue that's truly discretionary, that's not relied upon in some manner for the operating budget as it is. So the way we've been working on this, we're not giving up on it, but we truly have to see some change to 218 to give us the flexibility. And again, I don't even know if there's 3 votes on this board. I'm very candid about that. I just simply think it's important that every district, local agency, community has the ability to make that decision on its own. And if that's something that there was determined that it necessitated a different rate for different income levels, then the board could make that decision. But unfortunately, that is not an option right now with 218, and were we to move forward in that regard, we would put ourselves in position to be challenged, and the only certainty there is we'd pay a lot of money in legal fees. So I just want you to know we haven't given up on that issue, and that continues to be in our mind. But as we bring this forward, and I don't want to belabor it, but we're trying to use the 5 years to get out from under the problem that's been identified in the last two audits, that we underfund our sewer operations, and to the point that now, it's come to a head with the state saying you're not going to get the SRF funds. You don't even qualify for 100% financing on SRF for the West Point Wilseyville and project with about $4 million in funds. So that is a catastrophic event if we are boxed out of SRF funds. That's maybe the most important source of state and federal funding that we get for water and wastewater and the clean water and drinking water programs. It was actually something when was in DC a week or two ago. That's what we were advocating for, was more money for SRF, because it works. It's it's an investment in agencies that have a very low default rate, mostly in the form of loans, low interest loans that allow us to then leverage local monies like R&R funds. But that, bottom line, that's the kind of thing that I know none of us want that on our watch, that we lose access to SRF. That would be a disaster, because then we can't do all of the infrastructure projects that we're going to have to do, and the state is forcing us to do, particularly after the violations from last year, like other agencies. So as hard as it is to do this, and as painful, and as much as I hate having to propose this, and again, this is the last thing, this is the most difficult and painful experience to go through in this job or for a board, and we don't. And I told the board and said to the public, we're not doing this unless we have to, and we're only going to present what we absolutely have to have. And but at the end of the day, if we don't take care of this problem, we're going to be in a lot worse financial problem. Our viability is going to be in jeopardy, and I think it's going to cost us a lot, and could dramatically affect the rates of our customers in a few years in a very negative way. So. Again, I'm sorry, thanks for letting me go on about it, but I just want you to know that this is something that really does personally weigh on me and other staff, and we've spent a lot of time on this issue. So.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jeff. Is any further discussion on this item? All right, we really appreciate it. We're looking forward to the 28th.
Well, my only remark, and it really goes back to what Vicki said, is that, I've really wanted to see a change in Prop 218, or Prop 218, the rate hearings. I heard a lot of discussion, at the state meetings that we've had on this, and unfortunately, in the 3.5 years I've been involved here, so nothing has happened. And it's very disappointing. That's one of the reasons why I really don't see a future in a lot of these government kind of, moving at the pace of government. And it's unfortunate, but it's really our elected officials that I personally blame, once again, for a lot of these issues that are going on. They are not moving at the state level, Prop 218, to recognize disadvantaged communities and the needs that those communities have in relationship to water and wastewater. And I could say a lot of very strong words right now, but I won't. And I'm very disappointed. And with that, I'll be quiet.
You mean like the state government wants old and poor people to get out of the state?
Yeah,
That's exactly what they want.
So the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But again, that's just my opinion. And maybe I shouldn't be voicing that opinion in the chair that I currently sit in.
I mean, 20 years ago when I got on the board, or 18 years ago, I never thought I was going to end up being a tax collector, which is basically what we do here. We are required to collect the funds for programs that the state of California enacts without our ability to have a voice in it. And it's an unfortunate thing, and it's really unfortunate that the public doesn't seem to understand that really it's the mandates, and it's even, I'd like to see the figures of all the new mandates and all the new things that we're having to do, new staffers, Sigma as an example. It may be a well-meaning thing, but they didn't send a check with it. It's just something we have to comply with. It's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars annually eventually, and that's something we have to go to our ratepayers to make up. Well, while the legislators sit there and say, hey, we're saving groundwater, but we're making the local agencies, go to their ratepayers to do it. And it's just one of the things that really frustrates me about this job, is having to be a tax collector for things that we don't personally get to vote on. But anyway.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Anything further? All right, thank you. We're on to, did you want to take a? Okay, we're going to take a short break here, say five minutes, and we'll be back at it. Thank you.
We can have.
Okay, we're back, back in session after a short break. We're moving on to new business, 4B, discussion action regarding adoption of mitigated negative declaration of the Jenny Lynn Water Plant Pretreatment Improvement Project. Charles Palmer, District Engineer. Okay, Charles.
Good afternoon. And so we started the CEQA process. So there's a lot of history to this. So the project is funded through Cal-US, and FEMA, they usually go through their own internal process to approve the National Environmental Protection Act. And so we didn't have to participate in that process, other than we did do some initial studies that helped provide information for their effort. So, but as a lead agency in California, we're equally responsible to conduct our own independent CEQA, California Environment and Quality Act review. And so what the district did is we went out and retained the necessary qualified professionals, biologists, archaeologists, air quality folks. And so one of the first things you have to do is just define your project boundaries, the areas that are impacted. So this is just a map showing an aerial view of our water plant, with the yellow is the staging areas where we might stage construction equipment, and then the purple there is the area where the direct construction activities are going to occur. And it's, we're right next to a riparian zone. This particular site was the site of, in the vicinity of a former, a tribal site, cultural resources site. So really today what we're here for is to make a determination that, the district has agreed to certain revisions to the project and or mitigation measures, so that this project is mitigated to a level of a negative declaration with those mitigations incorporated. So, is there any questions?
Not yet.
Okay. So, and after the whole review, what you have is you have some mitigation measures, and that included a couple of biological mitigation measures, 2 cultural resources mitigation measures, and 1 hazardous materials mitigation measure. The 2 biological mitigation measures are, the first one is for frogs, since we're right next to the riparian zone, and there's just a potential there could be frogs there, so we just have to do a pre-construction survey. We have to monitor throughout construction to make sure there's no frogs entering the construction zone, and we'll have a biologist assist us in that process. And then the second biological mitigation measure is just doing a pre-construction survey nest for raptors and native nesting birds. And hopefully we won't find any nesting sites, but if we do, we'll have a biologist to help us with, assist us with the proper procedures to handle that, whether it just depends on how far away you are from the nesting site. Cultural resources will have, during ground disturbing activities, we'll have monitored by a qualified cultural resources specialist or archaeologist on call as needed. We don't expect anything to come up, but just in case. And then if we happen to find human remains, making sure we have a protocol for that. We have a documented protocol. We'll go through that with the contractor and our own staff to make sure in the event that there's an established protocol to handle that situation.
We found 3 there before.
Yes, this is Calaveras County, so it's some of our sites, project sites, we do encounter cultural resources, remains, and artifacts. It's not uncommon. And then the last mitigation measure is just heavy equipment, activities like, if it breaks down and has to repair it, refueling, because normally a lot of the heavy equipment's actually refueled in the field. Oil changes, hydraulic fluid leaks, antifreeze leaks, spill containment. So basically, we just need to make sure that all those activities are done away from the riparian zone and in the best possible location that it's not going to cause an environmental impact. So just to review how the steps we've taken to get to this point. We prepared the draft mitigated negative deck. We circulated that for a 30-day public review period. That started January 23rd until February 23rd of this year. We submitted it to the document to the state clearinghouse. We posted it, a notice at our project site. We posted a notice to the county clerk's office, and we advertised in the Calaveras Enterprise. So,
Excuse me,
Yeah.
did we get any
we did,
comments?
yeah,
We did?
we did. We'll
Oh,
get to
okay.
those right now.
Oh, okay.
Good question, good time.
So on the very next slide. So yes. So the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, they commented. They had just 4 comments. The first was just some terminology, because the biologist happened to say Sacramento Fish and Wildlife Office would be contacted in the event, and that didn't really distinguish if it was the state or the federal Fish and Wildlife. So we agreed to contact both of those agencies if a listed species was identified. And they just wanted, I don't think they had been out to the site, so they didn't realize there's actually a chain link fence there and the pavement ends where the riparian zone starts. But, we just said we'd go ahead and have a biologist come out and, I pinpoint where the riparian zone starts, and because they were questioning, well, how do you know where the riparian zone starts? So, and that has to be done by, it's better if it's done by a biologist, because then it has more legitimacy. And then if we do identify frogs on the site, what are we going to do? They just wanted more details about the monitoring activities and steps to ensure these frogs are not trapped in our construction area. So, if we do find frogs in the riparian zone, we'll probably put up some kind of exclusionary fencing, and so they just wanted to make sure the frogs didn't get trapped, like in the pavement area on the other side of the exclusionary fencing and couldn't get back into the riparian zone, or vice versa, or got trapped up, and maybe they get trapped in our excavation or something like that. So what's the process for removing these frogs from an excavation? If it is a listed species, you have to follow certain protocols to do that.
Those are all standard info that should have been included in the initial submittal, but was overlooked and some mistake was made, so be it.
So, and then I think the one thing that was, there was some debate whether or not the foothill yellow-legged frog should have been included. We identified the California red-legged frog, and then, so we just agreed with California Department of Fish and Wildlife that we would also include the foothill yellow-legged frog, since we were already doing all the monitoring activities for the red-legged frog. It wasn't really a difficult addition.
Yeah, basically same protocols,
Yeah.
so.
Look at their legs. I'm just guessing.
Well, actually, as part of that, we actually have to go to frog training, so, we have to all learn.
Frog sensitivity training. Maybe you want to sign up for that?
I'm sure I could use it.
So I have to learn how to identify a red-legged frog and a yellow-legged frog, along with our inspector, Jared, and the contractor. So
If we
We-
find,
I thought he was an engineer, Charles, but he's actually also a wildlife biologist and an ecologist. And
Yeah.
but I do want to note that, many other agencies have entire departments around environmental review and compliance. So the fact that Charles does this and engineering staff do the environmental review, I mean, I understood we had a consultant doing this, but obviously this was still a heavy lift for you to get to this point and to complete it and then to implement it. So I thank you for that. And again, it's one of those other things most people don't notice, that we can't do this project without having this in place. So
yeah, and a lot of times you hire a consultant, but they don't know what the construction activity is, what's involved in the construction activity. So you really have to work with them hand in hand to kind of develop what the project is, and so they can begin to identify what some of the impacts might be. And then the second comment was from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. They, and I have other comments from them on other projects, and it's exactly the same letter. So they just have a form letter they send out, and a lot of these, the basin plan and anti-degradation policy is kind of a very high level thing.
So Charles, maybe you just want to hit the high points on this instead of going through all.
Yeah. So, the only thing I saw in there that kind of concerned me a little bit that we're going to have to follow up on is just the waste discharge requirements, the local agency oversight, which is our health department. Because we're modifying the septic system, we're moving the septic tank over, we probably want to notify the health department that we're doing that. So that was probably a good catch. But, I guess that's it. So at this point, it is a public hearing. Also, if you had any questions, but basically the intent is that we're going to request that the board adopt the mitigating negative deck, and so can proceed.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the mitigated neg deck. Now we can go to public or comment or what?
Comment?
Well, wait a second, is it a public hearing?
It's a public hearing.
So we haven't opened a public hearing yet, as far as I can tell. Have we?
No. Okay, with the presentation, we'll open the public hearing is now open. We do have a motion from Director Strange. And we'll be asking for public comment, if any, in a few minutes. So let's have discussion here at this level. We're also looking for a second.
second.
Any discussion by the board of this
Just a point of order.
neg deck?
Do we have to close the public hearing before a motion is made, or what's the procedure here? I want to make sure we don't miss a step here.
I think before you take action on the motion, I'd suggest go ahead and complete the public hearing and then get the motion on
Then get
the
the
floor.
motion.
Okay.
Yeah, so I
Well, the
would say
pub-
let's complete the public hearing.
Okay.
I-
The public hearing has been opened. At this time, we're going to ask for any public comment. Okay, seeing none, close the
Board-
public hearing? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing, and Bertha, you have a comment or
Oh, yeah,
discussion?
I just had a comment. Charles, is this pretty cut and dry as far as the procedure is concerned? They haven't made any changes? Or if they made changes, you were aware of what?
Well, we had to make, we actually did get the public comments we received in writing. So, we have the public hearing, but we also did receive the public comments from Fish and Wildlife and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So that, I guess those are the only comments as
Okay.
far as those public comments, based on what we did make changes, especially based on what the California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, but my question was about procedure. There weren't any procedural changes?
No, this is
made?
all standard procedure.
Uh-huh. Okay, my other question was, were we sure that we asked everybody for their responses? No one was missing? I mean, they all followed through giving us,
We did have, it's probably good to close the loop with the agency. I was told by Dudek that are helping us on this project that it's not mandatory that you close the loop with these agencies and provide a written response back to them, as long as you address it
in your initial,
in this process, yeah. So,
And they obviously know of the public hearing, and they had the opportunity to be here today as well, so.
okay.
But the process going through the state clearinghouse, that's the point, is to make sure that that's a point of dissemination for the information of our proposed mitigated negative deck to go out to the,
yeah, there is a list actually there should be comments from the state clearinghouse, and the state clearinghouse, like you're saying, they distribute it to multiple agencies throughout the state, and so there were other agencies that this was issued to, but they didn't have any comments, so Caltrans responded just saying they didn't have comments, which was nice, so you know that they don't have them.
Okay.
None of the property owners in the area or anything made any comments?
We noticed it at the project site, right across, there are a couple of neighbors there right across the street.
Okay, we've opened and closed the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion then that we adopt the mitigated neg deck for the Jenny Lind Water Plant Pre-Treatment Project.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second, and we've already asked for public comment on this. Any further discussion here? Mona, can you take roll call?
Yes, Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
And Director Brenneman?
Yes. Thank you, Charles. I think you're going to stay there because you have 4C as well, which is a presentation discussion regarding fiscal year 18-19 draft capital improvement project. Go ahead.
So this is pretty much the same presentation I gave on engineering committee on the 6th, but I did make one slight addition. So these are just, we have a lot of different priorities in our CIP program, and, we, I don't know if I want to list them all off here. But, one that I think is important is just assisting O&M staff, and they are out there trying to make things work, and, we need to support them as best we can through our CIP program. So, worker safety, reliability, redundancy, that's often relating to, if you have, like up in West Point, we have one filter at the water plant. If anything happens to this filter, the whole town's out of water until we fix it. So, and actually the state noted in their last inspection report, happened to note the fact that we didn't have a backup system. So that's what's meant by redundancy.
Redundancy, yeah.
And, just providing for future growth, expansion, taking the opportunity to apply for grant funds, working through the hazard mitigation program to eliminate, our redwood tank program has been pretty successful there. Renovation and replacement of aging facilities. And then regulatory compliance, that's a big issue that's driving some fairly large capital projects. So And I just, you know, the starting point is just our last adopted CIP, so I handed that out. And I have some more copies here. That wasn't in the agenda item. But that's just the starting point. So this was the water program, the previous 5-year program. So the idea is we're just going to start with this, and then we're going to look at, you know, we worked with O&M to identify what we're calling a 10-year CIP. And the point of this was just to, it's an exercise to go through and document, you know, all the different needs and infrastructure needs and challenges we have in the agency and get them down on paper. So, you know, we're not necessarily going to adopt those into our CIP, but it's a list that we can identify some of the needs and pull them into the adopted CIP as we can. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The ones that were previously adopted in the 5-year, again, we don't necessarily have to complete those?
Well, we did complete some of them. Some of them will be coming off the list, like the notorious Reach 3A project that we've been talking about for 2 years now. So that's successfully completed and will come off the list. But to get at your question, you know, I mean, it could be an opportunity to if a higher priority comes up, to take a project off the list and replace it with another project. So we could potentially delete a project that we previously adopted on the list. Maybe if we haven't proceeded with it yet. You know, if we're already in progress with it, then that probably wouldn't be the best strategy. But
Okay, one of the ones that's, you know, was very critical that we had been hearing about was this arc flash assessment.
right.
And if it's not listed, that means it's already been done in that particular,
No, we haven't. We've done just a few of those. It's
because I really thought that was a,
It is very important. It is, yeah. From a worker safety perspective in particular, it's very important. Yeah, this is balancing a number of different, you know, high priority efforts that we need to do with staffing and financial resources. But again, I think if there are ones that are on the list that you feel particularly passionate about or have a particular view on, and that's really important to know that. You know, that does weigh on me that we need to make more you know, we need to make more progress on that and other projects that truly do have a very significant safety aspect to them.
yeah.
Sometimes, you know, I think as we've, you know, Charles probably knows better than anybody, a lot of our attention has to gets focused on the things that we're driven to do by the regulatory requirements, but we can't lose sight of some of these other things as well.
Well, our Techite pipe made it through the winter, so that was good.
Excuse me if I may add something. Part of the arc flash assessment was to purchase protective gear for the electricians. That does not show up in the CIP project or budget.
Right.
It has actually been purchased this year within the operating budget under utilities. We've already started purchasing all the protective gear.
Oh.
So that process has been ongoing, but you won't see it in this particular accounting.
But that's one aspect of it.
Yes.
Yeah, there's, the other aspect is that you have to go out and evaluate your facilities.
Right, there's the assessment portion of it, but there's also the
The
equipment
clothing,
portion.
yeah,
And I just wanted to make sure that your board knew that we were following up on the purchasing of the clothing, protective clothing.
I've got a few questions on this
Yeah,
list.
go
I don't
ahead.
know if now's the time or not.
Yeah, go ahead.
For West Point. One is that I don't see that $4.75 million wastewater treatment system listed on this.
Yeah, it's on page. first.
Yeah, I was
At least
gonna, I'm
table-
sorry,
table A.
my fault. I was gonna cover the water projects first. It is in there, under the wastewater projects.
Table B.
Oh, under
That's the
wastewater,
first-
okay, I'm sorry.
yeah,
So
first
in relation then to just the water, I apologize, a couple of things. The radio meters, a $350,000 project for an AMI radio meters, and that's only phase one. What does that involve?
Well, I kind of bump that number up a little bit because it's the first project and there's some initial startup costs associated with that. I think we have to, buy 3 handhelds or something like that? And
So they have to put a tower in then or something, or?
There's a couple different phases to this. One is there's some meters that have to be replaced completely because they're too old and the registers that go on top of the meters will not be able to fit them. There's also sometimes there's meter box replacements that go into effect. This is actually going to be a mobile read system.
Yeah,
For this. So there has to be the ability when a meter reader drives down the street to be able to activate and read the meters. So there's going to be a lot of work done on some of those. There's also the cost of the software, the initial cost.
No, you answered my question. I didn't put this into their water meter
Yes.
radio things. Got it. I
Yes.
thought this was some sort of communication for staff and what.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
The last thing
but
then-
just before you change it, I thank you for noting that project, though, because that is something we want to, and we're committed to doing, and assuming this gets adopted in the plan, is to do that over time comprehensively. Because we truly need to get to a point where we have more advanced technology. It's going to help us tremendously in staff time and in our operations, and it's also going to deliver a better service to our customers who can do things like get a notice when they're starting to have a problem with a leak on their side of the meter. They can actually get an alert to that through software programs that are available to couple with this.
Okay, and then the last thing is that a few years back, we did about half of the West Point water line, the underground stuff and all, but that was only half. And so my question is, in a 10-year scope, is going back and doing the other half of that for water conservation and others, so that's not visioned in a 10-year kind of thing? We're farther out than 10 years?
Yeah,
For something
maybe
like that?
further out than 10 years, just, if we're, that's where the prioritization goes into it,
Yeah.
and that's just ongoing, and that's something we're gonna get into, I think, in the future more, is just the ongoing, kind of the in-track subdivision level water main replacements, a lot of our, in that kind of water mains are probably gonna end up starting to need to be replaced, just because they've read where they are in the life cycle. And-
Okay.
But
Thank
I
you.
think we have more flexibility with that kind of work than we do potentially with some other projects, would be my interpretation of that.
It was a huge grant-funded
Right.
project,
Right.
so.
Yeah, and I think most immediately, that's something we've really focused on down in the Rancho Calaveras, Jenny Lind service area that, because that is affecting the quality of service, so that's where attention's being paid, but that really is an issue, just, as we heard from the Jenny Lind Water Master Plan update from Carl Brustad, how many miles of pipe of those, the distribution pipe system that we have to replace, we should be replacing on an annual basis, given its age, and to be able to keep up with it. So that, again, is another, it's another important one, and it's, I think this is ambitious, there's no doubt about it. I mean, cumulatively, we're talking about $84 million in projects over 10 years. So we're going to have to balance, our resources to do, again, we're not going to be able to get all of that accomplished. But our most need projects is certainly where we're going to focus our attention. But every one of these has some aspect that could, you can make a really strong argument that it's compelling and we should be moving forward with it, so.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry for the oversight.
No, not at all. That's why we're here. So to talk these things through. So anyway, I think that my presentation today is more about process and how we're going about this. So we had the last year's plan. We've been, O&M has been working with all the field staff to kind of scour through all the projects in their individual areas, and hopefully my list reflects most of what they've come up with too. So let me just maybe point out a few key things. We do have a water line that goes under Lake Tulloch, that probably again, it gets back to reliability and redundancy. We have no redundant line that goes around the lake, so that one line happens to go out, then that entire side of the lake's out of water. So I know I looked back at prior master plans, and there was a previously a plan to kind of loop that system along, what is that, O'Brien's Ferry Road, come down O'Brien's Ferry Road from maybe Copper Cove Drive down to Poker Flats. So, and then,
Yeah, and that's one that was raised by, again, as Charles was talking about, the time that operations department has spent on this as well. Looking at it, that was one that they really highlighted, that gave them a lot of concern because of the lack of redundancy and the challenges of trying to do something if there is a failure of that water line when it's lying on the lake bed. I mean, it's just, our focus has been on the sewer line, and rightfully so because of the risk of spill. But this one is likewise is one that we need to address. So I think actually I think our plan is stronger based on that input, the time and effort that engineering and ops has put on this, and that's probably why we see the breadth of projects that we've got on here. But again, it's important to get these out here. There may be opportunities for grants that we may not pursue if we didn't have these projects flagged and something that we're aware of, so that if an opportunity presents itself, we can go after it. So.
yeah, and then probably Copper Cove, the other main issue out there. I know we're going to have the master plan coming up. We're going to have a presentation on that master plan, but I know from prior master plans and just talking with staff that basically there's a little bit of a bottleneck coming out of the plant and working towards tank C. So there's not adequate transmission. We have the original pump station there that's probably 50 years old that's, keeping everybody in water out there. And I think we had a pump blow apart in there at some point a couple years ago, and the electrical's really old. So the idea was that we were going to put a bypass in. I think, if we can supply Saddle Creek more directly from the plant rather than C-Tank, that will help take some of the demand off of C-Tank and allow us to distribute the water further around the system. So, let's see here. And then just highlighting the fact that, Sheep Ranch is, it's, we don't have many customers there, but, the water plant hasn't been updated for several decades. And, I looked at our distribution lines out there are still just small galvanized lines, so no fire hydrant. They have fire hydrants, but I don't know how much flow you could get out of them, so not the only place in the county like that, but. So.
And they really don't have plans to increase numbers of homes out there. They're totally happy with the limited number of
right.
homes they have. They want to keep really big parcel sizes and all, and so, yeah, it's a challenge trying to, in my opinion anyway, trying to forecast the needs of that community when they're really not going to grow very much,
right.
unless,
right.
Yeah,
so the only thing I think we would have to worry about there is making sure that the water plant's up to snuff and meeting the water quality regulatory requirements that we're required to.
But I mean, that's miles of pipe and pumps to get the water out of San Antonio Creek to the treatment plant, and all of that infrastructure is aging. So and then we've got the issue of the reservoir, and what happens there, the sedimentation, and then the fact that it's also, and fortunately it's such a great public amenity, but the human body contact can in time become an issue, and it has for other agencies that they can be mandated to improve their level of treatment because of that. So I've been encouraging, and we talked about this in the engineering committee, I'm encouraging staff to really look at a way that any and all options, if we had the ability to connect to the Ebbets Pass system in lieu of working from this existing arrangement, would that make more sense, and we'd be able to deliver a better level of service and possibly have better fire flow protection. So in any event, that's going to be all of that's going to be on the table as we go through this.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
And one of the most challenging aspects that we faced when we were looking for grant money is a lack of cooperation in filling out some of the income surveys. And the outreach, the continued outreach that the district made on numerous efforts, and there was just not enough,
Trust.
yes, that's probably a good word. I was going to say cooperation, but without that information, we just can't go ahead and get grants for disadvantaged communities. And when you're talking 47 or 49 customers, it makes it very expensive per customer.
So let me summarize the water component here, segment. So basically, we've identified over $50 million in projects. Obviously, that's challenging from a funding standpoint and cash flow standpoint. Our R&R funds over 10 years are about $32 million. So, the current adopted 5-year CIP is about $30 million in projects. So, the general comment is just that we have a lot of more flexibility in the water program than the wastewater, but, we still need to prioritize our projects to make sure we're focusing on the highest priorities first.
Sorry about that.
It's all right, man.
And again, this list, of course, doesn't include the unknown emergencies that can and will arise, as we know from the fire and drought and our experiences, that there will be other expensive projects we have to be ready for. And if the R&R is the means by which we can deal with it.
So are there any other questions about the water program? Or I can move on to the wastewater.
Move on.
Okay.
Keep it moving.
Okay. So wastewater, this is the 5-year CIP from last year. It looks like we had something identified as Copper Cove Pond 6 enlargement expansion. That was a little bit of a placeholder, just knowing that the Copper Cove plant was going to need some kind of upgrades to meet regulatory requirements. And that's probably our most challenging project out there. Not our only challenge, but from a financial standpoint, our most.
Charles, I have an idea. We go through this periodically, the capital improvement projects, unless there's a change or something new for us. I think we're familiar with a lot of these projects from the last time we saw it. So maybe we can just kind of skip through on changes or updates or anything that's different from maybe last time.
Okay.
Just for any interest of time.
Yeah. So, I think we've covered, maybe the lift station in Arnold is something that we might add to the list, since that's a critical lift station. Pretty much all our sewage goes through that lift station, and it's located right next to a creek. O&M staff have mentioned that, they don't have a lot of response time there, about 10 minutes response time. So it's kind of a little bit of if we have a spill there, it's going to be probably, Regional Water Quality Control Board is going to be contacting us. So, we just got through with our master plan for Lock Antenna. So, I'll be working with O&M staff a little bit more focused on that and seeing what project they want to get onto the CIP. They identified, a clarifier as a bare minimum, and then Huckleberry Lift Station. They have some challenges with Huckleberry Lift Station. The pumps need to be replaced there as a bare minimum. And so Copper Cove, we've had, I guess, the initial presentation on the Copper Cove wastewater plant. So that's going to be one of our largest challenges is just, again, the regulatory conditions we have out there are very challenging. So I'll be having Bob quite a bit of his time focused on developing a more detailed plan for that facility. And
I think that's a really important one we highlight when we talk about some of the cost of regulatory compliance. Really, that one, the the Copper Cove, I mean, that is again, the intersection of the waste discharge requirements and then, of course, the MPDS permit requirements are even more rigorous. And the fact that those are dictated by the state. We're doing everything we possibly can to find a pathway that's least expensive to get through this, but the reality is it's going to be millions of dollars in capital improvements of some kind to be able to meet our requirements and to continue to operate and avoid a situation where we would be in violation of our permits. So.
Yeah, and my plan is to come back to the board once we develop a more detailed plan and inform the board about, more on the details of what that is, so.
It is good to see that we're doing all that engineering in-house. I mean, that's I think is a big savings and a big control.
Yeah.
That is good to see.
Yeah, Bob's a very excellent wastewater engineer, and, he's just as good as any consultant we can hire, so.
Good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a lot of his time is on the wastewater permitting side and capital side. Frankly, I think we're spread a little thin on the water capital side. And I think too much at this point is falling on Charles, and he's doing an excellent job. But it's, I'm with you. We deliver quality results when we have internal control over it.
And, so next steps what I'm going to do next is I'm going to sit down with O&M, go through the last year's list. We'll revise it. We'll come back to the board on the 28th with a final 5-year plan for adoption, and the plan is gonna have to reflect, just the financial realities of what we can afford to do, and also what the regulatory is, from that standpoint, what's driving everything.
We see a lot of the same list, but they do come in different orders from time to time, in a different order based on priority at that particular month or part of the year.
So that's all I have on this then.
Can you do me a favor, Charles? Can you please go back to one of the slides that showed all the 10-year projects for sewer and the funds available? There we go. If you look, sewer, as we talked about today, is our biggest challenge because he's identified $34 million worth of projects, but we've only got about $11 million worth of funding. And this is where it's critical to make sure we have adequate funding on our operational side to make us eligible for grants and or loans. We are not going to be able to complete our sewer CIP program without loans. It's just going to have to be part of the process here because you can't put such a burden on the back of 4,800 customers. It's going to take us some time. So it's going to be important that we look at this strategically as we go forward and to be able to, and I noticed with Charles and we talk about this, is we do all, especially after this last rainy season, the priority list had to change a little bit because we're responding to the regulatory requirements. So as you mentioned, we've seen a lot of these projects and it's kind of jumbled and priorities have changed. A lot of that can be traced to regulatory or the fact that the systems we have are failing faster than we anticipated them. Because in the past, we've kind of run to failure and we kind of estimate when we think they're going to fail. And if they fail a little bit faster, we got to jump on them faster because if you wait till the very end, it gets very, very expensive to fix. Plus, on top of that, you may have spills like you talked about up at the Arnold lift station. So we have to be mindful of all this. And Charles and Jesse have been juggling, and the Fields guys have been juggling all this to try to find out what's most important at this particular time.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to belabor it, but it's critical that we preserve the SRF funds. If we immediately lose access to the $4.75 million at West Point Wilseyville, which is something we're going to have to do, we're on the clock. We have to make a capital investment in those systems, one way or the other. So having that at risk, and then if we don't address the underlying fiscal issue that would make us ineligible for those funds, so we lose access to all clean water SRF funds, then we also become an unattractive investment for seeking loans from any other source, and it becomes much more expensive for us to acquire that because we're a more risky investment. So again, that that compromises the ability to do things just like removing the sewer line from the reservoir. And I can't even, that's one of those that we, it's not there's no fluff in that. We absolutely have to get these projects done because of the risks of failure, and all of the damages and financial penalties would be, it would be catastrophic. So again, I know it's very difficult and most people don't see this side of it, but this is why we had to bring what we did forward to the board so that we preserve the ability to get these projects done. It's too important.
And one other procedural note, as if you remember back to last year's budget process, we had Charles bring forth the 5-year CIP to your board for approval, because that's then translates into what we're going to need to put into the overall budget for 18-19. So we get this solidified. We know what type of support we're going to need as far as in-house support. That'll then be put into the overall budget process. So this is a very important step in the overall budget process.
Russ? Okay, you're right, we did go into this pretty much almost word for word in the engineering department, but
Right.
one thing that I wanted to bring forward to discuss among the other board members here is the deficiencies. One of the objectives here is to correct the deficiencies, and in my district, one of the most glaring deficiencies, as I pointed out at the meeting, was the manner in which we're dealing with the wastewater generated by the Coppertown Square project. And I've had a discussion, Robbie left the room, I guess, but I'm kind of encouraged that he has identified a routing or a proposed possible alternate routing for the sewer pipeline that would come in at, I think, at a reasonable price. It's less than 3 miles of piping. And in discussions with the representatives of Castle and Cook, that they do have that $1.2 million commitment that they still acknowledge that it wouldn't have to be funded out of the 11 million that we have in this short-term capital improvement thing for Copper Cove. The reason I'm kind of hammering on this is that, to me, it will improve the economic outlook for Copperopolis if we can remove that stigma of transporting the sewage in a 18-wheel pipeline. They're beating up the roads. It almost is like not validating the whole concept of that center to have it operating in that very unusual manner. So anyway, let's please not come back with a finalized 5-year capital or a 5-year plan for the Copper Cove area without running all this stuff to ground. Seeing where Robbie's discussion with Castle and Cook is going, and just seeing what the impact of that improvement would be financially to the district. I think it would be very small. The benefit would be tremendous, and the outlay from the district would be very minuscule in comparison.
Yeah, and I don't know, that's a good question. They don't submit any kind of an application or anything, and it's hard to reach out to these folks, and things like that can just fall to the back, so not that I intend to do that, but it just, you figure everybody's going about their business in the routine, and they're used to performing things, and how do you reach out to these folks to move those kind of projects forward?
Well,
I'm sorry.
I guess the one thing that is in motion, but it hasn't been totally wrapped up with a ribbon around it, is the conservation easement on the Oak Canyon Ranch project. Had that project continued to go forward, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But now that it seems to be, from all the information that I can get, it's off the table and always will be, to have the conservation easement purchased by the Rangeland Trust. So we have to come up with a different solution, and I think the solution should be pursued aggressively and get it done. While there's still people around who remember the circumstances.
Sure.
And I'm one of them.
Right.
Doggone it, let's push it and make it happen.
I think, don't we have the wastewater master plan for Copper coming back to the board at the next meeting or
I don't
shortly
think we've
thereafter?
adopted it yet, no, so,
But we will be coming back with it
yeah.
shortly. And I know that was identified, and when we brought the draft, was this very issue was one that there was direction to work on this and try to incorporate recommendations on this. So let's use that, and and I hear you even more, you want to see that if there is a project out of that it's reflected in the 5-year plan that's brought back to the board for adoption. So let's put that on our list to make that a priority.
Well, just at the risk of being overly redundant, they've been operating with this temporary system for 10 years. It's 2008 when it went into effect, and it's don't you think it's time, Jesse?
Well, what we need to be sure, I mean, it's, my limited understanding is it was based on, it was expected for further development and to complete the rest of that work to make this possible. So we need to we really have to look at the financial aspect of this and the equity side of it. We need to make sure that completing improvements that would have been paid by new development, how would we do that in a manner that wouldn't unfairly burden existing customers with the rates that they're paying? So I want to find a solution to this, and I want to get this incorporated. So, we've identified this before. Let's just plan to bring it back.
I see this as, this, I don't know that we should be searching for a solution for this until we have an actual general plan. I mean, because we can't really, even the plan that we're doing, the sewer master plan, is really not going to be valid until we have an adopted general plan. As far as I'm concerned, and that's true of any of these things. I mean, hopefully, within a year or two, we'll have the temporary solution to our general plan, which is 20 years old now, resolved, and then we can take care of some of these other issues, but.
Don't hold your
Well,
breath.
on that particular comment, Robbie showed me a document that gave the authorization for the sewer installation based on a prior iteration of the general plan. I mean, this is approved. I mean, it's a done deal. The only thing that isn't finalized is the routing. And
Which again, if there's gonna be development in the area, we wanna know where it's gonna be, so we don't create something that's gonna be replaced later, or that needs to be bigger.
Jeff, the installation of that pipeline was, you might say, an absolute requirement, just like putting roofs on all the buildings there in Coppertown Square. It was because of CCWD's saying, hold it, you can't do that, that it wasn't done back in 2007, 2008. So Robbie showed me a very imaginative, shortest distance between 2 points solution to this problem. I think that it could be, I'm not in favor of waiting another 2 or 3 years for the general plan before we do something about this particular thing.
Well, let's continue this conversation. You're part of the engineering
Yeah.
committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'd be the place to take this up and then bring it to the board when you got a solution.
Until you take me on.
Along with the copper sewer plan.
You'll get stay on there, trust me. Okay, moving
So
on.
I think that was it as far as my presentation goes, so.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for both of those presentations. Charles, we're ready to move on to item 4D, discussion action regarding calling general district election. Mr. Egerton.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This, again, is just as you know, we've got 3 seats up for election this fall, and we need to go through the process of making proving that this be included within the consolidated general election in November. That was, of course, something that the board took action on several years ago so that we wouldn't have to have an independent election that would be more expensive to conduct just for our district. So there is cost savings. We don't have the exact estimate of the amount of the expense associated with the general election. We'll have to get that information from the registrar's office Elections Office, they'll give us the details on that, but I think our estimate, Mona, we're thinking probably in the neighborhood of 10 to 20,000, I believe, which is certainly much less, tens of thousands less than what we would incur if we had to do this independently. So with that, I just request that you adopt the resolution attached, and we make that request.
I move for acceptance.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion here?
Excuse me, those are mail ballots?
No.
No?
No, that was the previously, it's my understanding that was the way it was done when we weren't within the consolidated
Oh,
election
okay.
cycle. But this
Okay,
would
so we
be on the
changed
ballot
it.
and
Yeah,
at
okay.
the polling
On the
place.
ballot
or-
November.
or absentee.
Write down the dates. Write down the dates you need to file by. Okay, no further discussion here. Any public comment? Seeing that, Mona, can you take roll call?
Yes, Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
And Director Rational?
Yes. All right, passes 5-0, thank you. Item 4E, discussion action regarding purchase of property in Copperopolis for future wastewater system upgrades. Charles Palmer, and Robbie Kramer.
Finally. Charles asked me to present this, but I'd like to have him actually speak first to give you an idea of why we feel this property is necessary. Charles?
So this is located at Lift Station 18. I know we briefly talked to board members about this before. We have a fairly significant lift station at this location on Kiva Court, and it's right now the lift station is wedged between two adjacent properties, and when they dedicated the original subdivision, they really didn't provide adequate space. So we have about a 15-foot wide by maybe 30-foot wide space that the lift station's sitting on, and there's no dedicated access to this lift station. So, and obviously we're buying more property. I think it'll provide the access that our operations staff needs to not impact the neighbor there. And then the advantage also is that we can utilize the existing electrical facilities at this location, which, we had to relocate. It would be a substantial cost. So there are some advantages to sticking with the same location. So.
Thank you very much, Charles. You can see from this picture the label Lift Station 18. Just to the right of that is the actual lift station. I apologize for the quality of the picture, but it's really shoehorned in between two lots. It's within an easement boundary. We don't own the property. The actual property for this lift station is about 2 blocks from here. When they built it, it turned out that the requirements of the system necessitated the location that you see today. This is where it has always been. And with what we're doing to the, good. You can see 4715 Kiowa, and then lift station 18 is actually underneath all those trees. Power's there. There's also a fire hydrant in front of the station. You can see the fire hydrant in this picture clearly. It's along Kiva Drive, which is the main drag between our wastewater treatment plant and the lake. This is a picture of the lot.
In that previous picture, where was the lot?
On the corner.
Underneath the 4715.
Okay.
That's one empty lot right there.
Between the words Tiva and lift?
So are we buying one complete lot?
Okay.
It's the corner lot right there.
I move for
Yes.
acceptance of the purchase for future wastewater system upgrades in Copper.
Excuse me, sir?
He's making the motion.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is necessary for the upgrade, the project that we're in design right now to improve this lift station, and it will make life much easier for us and less impactful to the neighborhood by us having this property to maintain it.
I'll
the facility.
second.
Your presentation is so good, you only need half of it.
That they should all be that good. Thank you very much.
We got a motion and a second. Anything further? Well, Robbie, was there any more important topics that you needed to throw in there before we vote on this?
Nothing else I can think of.
Okay, all right. Good job, thank you. Any further, any comments, any discussion?
How
the
close
board?
is that to the lake?
Excuse me?
How close is that to the lake? And I assume it's uphill of the lake?
It's directly uphill, you know, half a mile, three-quarters of a mile, something like that. What you have is 3 lift stations that collect at the lift station by the lake that pumps to this lift station, which then lifts the effluent over the hill. And what we need to do is replace this. This is one of the older dry can lift stations, and we can barely park there. There's absolutely no room.
Yeah, I see it's on our list of CIP projects as well.
Yes, it's on the list.
Okay.
Good.
All right, any other questions, discussion? Any public comment on this item? Rona, would you please take roll?
Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
And Director Brenneman?
Yes. All righty, thank you. Item 5, old business, nothing to report. Mr. Egerton, General Manager report?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to briefly give you a recap on a couple of efforts underway. One, the AB 142 report is nearing completion right now with the State Natural Resource Agency. We've been working, as you know, as a coalition with other local water agencies, Amador Water Agency, Jackson Valley Irrigation District, and Calaveras Public Utility District to get further edits to the special provisions that were included in the draft report. Those special provisions are essential for us. We've talked about this with the board. We've gotten direction from the board. That's most fundamentally necessary to make sure that we can utilize the existing water rights to the fullest extent and existing facilities so that we don't have any stranded assets. We are, like I said, we're getting close. I think the resource agency will be, it's representing they're going to complete their report by the end of this month. And so I think we're going to have probably one final meeting with them, with all stakeholders next week. We've been in close communication with them. We've been down there meeting with them last week. Today, that's why I'm sorry I was a little late for the meeting, because I was meeting with Assemblymember Bigelow on this effort as well. He's been incredibly supportive and wanted to know what was happening, and very much wants to see this completed satisfactorily for our communities. So in any event, this is it's a very important effort. So we've got a lot of time and energy spent on this. I appreciate President Ratterman. You have, and I know it's something you probably were going to announce in your director comments, but you've created an ad hoc committee to support this effort to completion through the legislative process, and I believe that's you and Director Strange. I thank you both for being willing to do that. I think that's going to be very helpful. We have our other agencies that are working on this are likewise having ad hoc board committees formed to participate in it. So we've got some work to do. Again, our ideal outcome at this point would be to have a report that's completed in a manner that we believe protects our interest, and then we can have that in of course that's the final form that would be presented to the governor and the legislature, and then we would have a platform to seek that is the language that's included in any legislation that moves forward. So with that, again, that's ongoing, and we're working on it and spending a lot of time on it. Lastly, I just want to mention that I think my trip to D.C. I think was very productive. I spent a day doing visits on behalf of the district. I had a really good meeting with Congressman McClintock's staff, Chris Tudor included, who's the main person on water policy, and then Senator Feinstein's John Watts, who is her primary person on water policy. And we really spent a lot of time going through the effort that's underway under the WIN Act and the outcome of that. And they're both offices are very supportive of us in that and want to see that completed in a productive way that we can then utilize to determine a pathway that we can try to gain access to the reservoir for many important reasons that we've identified before. So I think we're making good progress on that. We continue to work closely with Reclamation here in the area office and the regional office to, as that report is being prepared. And so I think I'm encouraged by that, and I think we will see a report in a matter of months that I think is going to be something that I believe it's going to be a positive outcome that's going to identify a pathway. With that, we've got another trip back to DC in a few weeks. I know we've got the National Water Resources Association conference and lobbying effort out there, and as well we'll have our visits arranged through me out there. And I think one of the things that would be really important, and I've communicated this to the regional office, is that we are going to be meeting with the commissioner, Reclamation's commissioner's office to keep them informed and in the loop, because again, this report will go through them and will be issued by the commissioner, so their knowledge and understanding of how important it is to our district and our community, our county is vitally important in that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry, you want to, we're on to item number 7, board reports, information, future agenda items. Director Stange, would you like to start us off?
Let's see, we've got a meeting, Joel, myself, and Dave, with local West Point folks Tuesday at 10:30. Start the beginning of this whole process of potential rate increases and whatnot, as well as just an outreach for other important issues as well. Jeff, last time I talked about maybe having John Mills, a little update on what he's been doing for the district within, the last year or so. It's been a while since John has been here, so I'd just like to get kind of an update on what work he's been doing.
You bet.
In that, whether it's a letter or whatever is fine.
Sure. And Director Stange, thanks for bringing that up. I'd like to talk to you offline about that if you've got a chance after the meeting as well.
Okay, that's fine. And then, is there any update? I haven't looked on the website, but update as to reservoir levels and whatnot with this last storm? Are we kind of seeing the March miracle / February phenomenon catch up with the earlier lack of rainfall this year?
Well, reservoir storage levels have been good coming out of last year, so that was the one protection we had with what was looking like a very poor water year this year. But we're going to have to see how it turns out. I mean, this month is going to be critical as the reservoirs like Hogan are moving off of a flood management curve and allowing more impoundment. Then we can see what the outcome of these storms are. But even as of in the last 24 hours, I've heard still unlikely that we'll see technically a miracle March. But it's certainly, these are some productive storms, and if we were to get into one or two more, I think we'd be in a much better position. But again, we came in with a good storage coming into this year, and I think that's the biggest concern, is if we deplete storage because of a drier year, the position that puts us in going into next year, and if we have another dry year, now that compounds the problem.
Okay.
But we'll come back with an update at the next board meeting on where we are with storage levels.
Great. And last thing, in looking at the South Fork McCullum, which I have opportunity to do almost daily, turbidity levels are higher than I've ever seen in that system, and I think I know why, but I'm not going to say specifically. But I think the combination of dead tree removal, access, and the disturbance to ground to make that happen, bringing heavy equipment in to some of the clearing for the previous cannabis operations to a variety of forest management activities. I mean, usually it runs a lot clearer after these storms, and it's just not happening. So with that, that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Jeff?
I have nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Okay, the other end of the table, Bertha, what?
Oh, yes, Joel has been attending the EPOC, Ebbets Pass Property Owner Council meeting on a regular basis. We have kind of like a tag team. He lets me know what I can talk about, and then he fills up the gentleman in or the representatives in with a lot of detail. Everyone up in Ebbets Pass is well aware of the rate increase, because I noticed in the Union Democrat, the left-hand front page, they talked about a rate increase. And so he's been upfront. He and Dave have been having one-on-one meetings with several of the ratepayers, so everybody is above board and they know how transparent we are at, this time about the rate increase. So I'm very pleased with the response that we will get, and I hope 218 doesn't, we won't get negative press because of the 218. I just expect it to go very well. That's all I have.
Russ?
Okay, this morning I went to the groundwater recharge meeting in Stockton. More of the same down there. Want to point out that tomorrow there's going to be a meeting here with the representative from the consulting company that the group has agreed to pay $2 million to prepare the groundwater recharge plan. I'll be there if any other board member wants to drop in. It's from 2 to 3
Where?
here.
That'll actually be the members of our groundwater sustainability agency, I believe, will be in attendance. We'll have Rock Creek Water District and Irrigation District and
Stanislaus County.
Stanislaus County. I would hope the county,
Yeah.
our county, be there as well. Yeah, which is, I think, the first time we've actually gotten everybody together in one location.
Actually, our group is going to be meeting to kind of get our heads together from 2 to 3, and then from 3 to 4, the consultant will be here. So this is just, as you say, a kind of a 30,000 feet look at where we're going with this thing. So
Interesting to be looking forward to a report from how that turned out or what you guys discussed.
all right, next time. I think that's. We will have a town hall meeting with Dave and with Joel down in Copper Cove on April 10th. Looking forward to that too.
Yeah, we're going to be doing those all over the district in the next in the month of April. Yeah, and that's just part of the outreach. We're reconnecting with a lot of the individuals and groups that we've met with over the last number of months as well.
That's all. Yeah, I actually I did recall, I got a call actually from somebody this week about Sigma. So a consulting, disclosure company that works for realtors that solicits bids so they can do, so they can provide the disclosure documents for a real estate transaction. Was soliciting one of the realtors in Valley Springs, and one of their requirements that they wanted to start to disclose was our county putting people on wells on meters. And this was, it kind of came as a bit of a shock to me, but it's actually, people are out there putting that sort of thing out, professional people seeking contracts through realtors, and to whatever level that we can dispel that sort of myth. I actually thought about...
And it is largely a myth because it has to be a certain quantity of water, which doesn't apply to your typical residential user. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I might request in the future is that we come out with some sort of language and put it on our website, just because I don't want that to be, if people are taking that to real estate offices and making them sign disclosures, anybody with a well is going to think twice about that, and that we don't need that sort of headache, and it's certainly nothing that is going to occur in our county, at least at our request. I can't imagine. So I might just talk to you, Dave, and then maybe get Joel to publish something on the website that will dispel that myth. That's all.
Okay, thank you. To piggyback on Dave's conversation about wild and scenic, I think after meeting with Frank Bigelow today, he will be at Camps and Angels Camp today talking to the Calaveras County Republican Party at 6 p.m. We hear from the back of the room. Thank you, Vicki. 6 p.m. and I think Peter from CCWD, Peter Martin, will be there as well. And that should be a lively discussion, and I'm hopeful that it'll have a good outcome. Mountain
What's the
County,
topic of that?
wild and scenic.
Okay.
Mountain Counties, which I'm a board member, we have a meeting this Friday at El Dorado Irrigation District, at EID on Friday the 16th. The Mountain Counties has several, and I'd like to encourage staff, I'd like to encourage our general manager to promote these, maybe within some of these functions within staff. They're putting on a lot of, John Kingsbury put a lot of effort into a few programs he's got going on. One is about the water bond. They have a travel and show on April the 10th. I won't be in town, but it'll be coming to the San Andreas Town Hall is their last stop. They're meeting that morning with what's his name? Jerry Merrill, who's behind the water bond, will be part of the program and part of the presentation. They're starting in Placer County, be from 9:30 to 10:30 that morning, and moving to El Dorado County. That'll be at 12:30 to 1:30, and then they're coming to the San Andreas Town Hall. John Kingsbury with Mountain Counties has not got a very much of a response, but I'd like to encourage as many people that can go to that April 10th right here in San Andreas. He also has a California Water Technology Symposium that Mountain Counties is putting on at the Ridge on March 23rd. Thank you again. March 23rd, and that's at the Ridge in Auburn. Another symposium, doors open at 8:15, pretty much an all-day thing. But that's something that a lot of local water districts, and I think they've gotten, since publishing this and putting it out there, there was a complaint, we heard from John today, or this week, that they only got 2 or 3 people out of 6 counties to sign up. So he's just looking to get the word out. If anyone's interested, if any staff is interested, again, March 23rd at the Ridge. And I think that's all I have at this point.
What was the time on that town hall in San Andreas?
That would be 3 to 4 here in San Andreas.
Okay.
And that'll be their third presentation of that day. They ought to have it pretty refined by then. Where they're looking for some people to show up and ask them intelligent questions. Okay, our next board meeting's Wednesday, March 28th, here in this room, regular board meeting, and then because we canceled the April 11th one, our meeting following that will be Wednesday, April 25th. We do have a closed session item to discuss today.
Mr. President, actually, we're going to request that we skip the closed session today. We don't. It was on the calendar if needed, but we don't need it at this time.
So no closed session, but we do have a special meeting. So we're going to adjourn this regular board meeting at this point. But don't go anywhere.
Don't go anywhere.
We're going to convene our new special board meeting Wednesday, March 14th. It has been noticed to start no earlier than 3, so we have met that requirement. It's a little after 3 p.m. today, and so we're going to call the meeting to order. Do we do Pledge of Allegiance again? Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We need to honor the flag and our country. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mona, can you take roll?
Here?
Yep. Yes, here.
Here.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
And Director Redmond?
Okay, and before we start this meeting, any public comment? At this time, members of the public, blah, 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 any public comment? Seeing none, going to move on to new business, item 3A, discussion action regarding approval of membrane equipment purchase for Vallecito Treatment Plant. Jesse, and Mr. Dave Egerton.
Mr. President, members of the board, I just want to let you know that by adding a special meeting, this is not something we do unless we If we had had this information and the knowledge that we needed to bring this item to the board at the time we prepared the regular agenda for the meeting that we just concluded, we would have certainly included it within it. But this is reflective of things that have happened within the last few days that we've come to realize that there's an issue with our membranes, existing membranes at the Vallecito plant that needs to be addressed. Immediately, it was something that we don't feel comfortable waiting until the next meeting to address, and so I appreciate you guys allowing us to move forward with a special meeting. With that, I'll step out of the way.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, my apologies. I don't want to keep you guys here any longer than what we have to. So basically, this resolution is asking to make a purchase of membrane plates that go into our membrane wastewater plant at our Vallecito Douglas Flat wastewater treatment plant. Generally, this is a regular maintenance deal. There's a time frame on these membranes that are between 5 to 7 years in time span. We just finished our 5th year in operation on this membrane plant, and it was kind of a domino effect. Late last week, the plates started failing, and from one to one, they just start failing. So, give you an idea, there's 1,500 individual membrane plates at this wastewater treatment plant. So the goal is to come in. The reason for this board meeting is to get the equipment on site as soon as possible so we can replace the membranes. It's going to be a good project that I have much confidence in our staff that they can complete, and at the same time I will have the manufacturer of the plates does a free site visit, so they will be out there assisting as far as a technical aspect. So, do you guys have any questions?
Move for acceptance of the purchase.
Okay, we do got a motion, got plenty of time for discussion. Any second?
Second?
Okay, questions, discussion?
Are they, you say they're failing right now?
They're in the process.
There's not a complete failure?
We have not,
No.
we haven't violated our permits or had any, unpermitted discharges from the plant, but it's at a point now where from what I understand, what we would normally do to try to address the issue, I think we're seeing more sedimentation coming through the system that's
Yes.
indicating a problem, and we're not able to change. They've tried to tinker with the operation and make some adjustments to see if it would address it, and it's confirmed that all of the plates are at a point where they need to be replaced. I think one of the things we learned from this is that it's likely that because of the high flow events of last year, that probably put more stress on the system, and that may very well be why we're not able to capture 7 years of the lifespan of this product.
And this is maintenance that needs to be done every 5 to 7 years for the life of the plant? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And how
So-
long will it take us to get it, and how long will it take to install it?
I will find out tonight how long it'll take to get the plates on site. I'm looking at probably a 2 to 3 day process of changing these plates out.
How many of them?
There's 1,500,
Okay, wow.
so it's, and just to add, the operators have done a great job, and this issue was kind of sprung on them, and they took it, ran with it. They've been able to keep everything under control, so.
So are we setting aside the $26,000 a year, knowing that in 5 to 7 years, these things are going to be, need to be replaced per treatment facility so that we can replace these easily?
So that is my plan, is to now, this has been not brought to light. We always kind of knew that this process would happen eventually. We just didn't know it would happen right at that 5-year mark.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now that it is in my head, that is a plan for budget for that, for the upcoming we can probably purchase the material beforehand and keep it on site that way, in case something happens, we can do a switch out.
Right.
And it wouldn't be to this effect.
Now, if you had that in inventory in the district, so to speak, ready to be used at, at more than one facility, are all of our treatment plants kind of within that same design to where the plates and, you know what I mean? If
Yeah.
we had something, yeah.
This membrane technology, it only resides at Vallecito Douglas Flat wastewater plant. There's nowhere else in the district that we use this treatment technology.
Is that
So why is that? Just because I don't know.
it's the newest plant?
Well, so to my knowledge, during the whole, because we got a grant to put that plant in, and to my knowledge, the grant specified you had to use the newest technology on the market. That's just from hearsay. But it does require a lot of maintenance.
Yeah,
Which
and
the grant won't fund.
No, and in fact, this is something we need to look at this and determine, is this, given now newer technology, are there certain changes that we should be looking to make? I mean, in time, we'll have to make some we'll have capital projects at the plan, and will it make sense to maybe make some changes that allow us to maybe lower some of the ongoing operational costs so we don't incur something like this that obviously is going to happen again, as
Yeah.
long as we're with this technology, so.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
You probably have sought out other options for this, but is it possible that for $130,000 you could get a standalone unit from somebody else that might last longer? You can just bolt in, or you have to use the 1,500 plates?
Well, that's good thinking. At this point in time, it would be, if we went that route, I'd rather just purchase something, and you're probably looking in the neighborhood as like a package deal, more than 200,000. And we'd have to go through the state regional board to see if they would even allow us to put something in place to do that.
I would suggest when Bob comes up for air after Copper, all his work down there with the permits, that we take a look at this and see if this is something we want to
Absolutely,
look at.
yeah.
Any further questions? Discussion? We do have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing none, Mona, can you take roll call?
Director Director Strange,
Yes.
Director Davidson,
Yes.
Director Thomas,
Yes.
Director Underhill,
Yes.
and Director Evans.
Yes.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
motion
President.
Thank you, Jesse. Okay, that finishes our special meeting. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Dave?
I don't know when this is gonna happen, but,
I don't know, 29th.
All of that rain that we had in Copper?
It's just rain.
Oh, just rain.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.